I never told my ex-husband I served 13 years in the Navy SEALs. To him, I was just the shy woman he used to mock, until my daughter sent me her secret distress code. Just 15 minutes later, his entire empire was completely destroyed. My name is Rebecca, and I am 34 years old. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to hide your true strength to protect someone you love. The wrought iron gates of Jason and his new wife Courtney opened slowly, revealing a sprawling Palo Alto estate that looked more like a fortified compound than a family home. I pulled my weathered pickup truck into the massive circular driveway, feeling the immediate and harsh contrast between my modest life and his excessive wealth. Lined up along the perfectly manicured hedges were sleek sports cars and luxury sedans, gleaming under the bright California sun. It was Friday afternoon, which meant it was time for my court-ordered weekend drop-off for Lily. I turned the engine off and looked at my beautiful 10-year-old daughter sitting in the passenger seat. She was clutching her small overnight backpack tightly against her chest, her knuckles turning white. She hated these weekends just as much as I did, but we both knew the rules. We had to play the game to keep the peace. We walked together up the wide stone steps leading to the entrance. The massive oak front doors were propped wide open, revealing a lavish catered brunch spilling out from the grand foyer onto the sprawling back terrace. Waiters in crisp white shirts circulated seamlessly through the crowd, with silver trays of mimosas and expensive appetizers. Jason was hosting a gathering for high-net-worth venture capital investors. This was his element, a world built entirely on appearances, status, and ruthlessness. I kept my head down, holding Lily by the hand, hoping we could simply slip inside, drop her bag in the hallway, and leave without a major incident. But luck was rarely on my side when it came to my ex-husband. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence today." The voice sliced through the ambient chatter of the party like a sharp knife. Courtney, Jason's 29-year-old wife, sauntered toward us holding a crystal champagne flute. She was dressed in a pristine white designer dress that probably cost more than my entire garden center makes in a single month. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her smile was entirely predatory. She stopped a few feet from us, her eyes slowly and deliberately scanning me from head to toe, making her disdain painfully obvious. "Oh, Rebecca," Courtney said loudly, ensuring that her voice carried to the nearest group of investors. "You really brought her here wearing those faded jeans. And look at your hands." She let out a sharp, condescending laugh that made my blood boil. "It is so cute how you still play in the dirt all day at that little gardening shop of yours. You really should scrub the soil from under your fingernails before coming to a civilized neighborhood like this." Several of the wealthy guests turned to look at us, their faces a mixture of pity and amusement. I felt Lily squeeze my hand tighter, seeking comfort. I squeezed back gently, a silent promise that I was perfectly fine. Jason excused himself from his group of wealthy investors and strolled over, wrapping a possessive arm around Courtney. He looked at me with that familiar smirk, the exact one that always made me want to break something. "Now, Courtney, be nice," Jason said, his tone dripping with fake sympathy that felt worse than an insult. "Rebecca cannot help it. She has always been hopelessly timid. Not everyone is cut out for success in the real world. Some people are just destined to be small." He looked down at Lily, then back up to me, his expression hardening into genuine contempt. "Honestly, it worries me. A growing girl needs to see ambition. She needs a proper role model who knows how to navigate life, not someone who hides behind potted plants all day." The humiliation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The old Rebecca, the one Jason thought he knew, would have crumbled right there on the expensive tile. She would have cried or apologized or run away. So I did exactly what he expected me to do. I lowered my eyes to the floor. I rounded my shoulders, making myself appear physically smaller and weaker. I let him believe his cruel words had deeply wounded me. I played the role of the mousy, defeated ex-wife to absolute perfection. But beneath that carefully constructed civilian mask, the highly trained operative in me was wide awake and calculating. While Jason and Courtney basked in their petty cruelty, my eyes were completing a rapid tactical sweep of the entire courtyard. I noticed everything. Jason had recently hired private security. Two armed men stood by the terrace doors trying to look intimidating in their tailored black suits. I dissected their physical vulnerabilities in mere seconds. The guard on the left was carrying his weight heavily on his right knee, indicating a prior injury he was poorly overcompensating for. A simple lateral sweep kick to his joint would bring him down instantly. The guard on the right had terrible situational awareness. He was too busy watching the caterers instead of monitoring the perimeter. His holstered weapon was positioned awkwardly on his hip, meaning his draw time would be at least 2 seconds. 2 seconds is an absolute eternity in close-quarters combat. If I needed to, I could disarm him, incapacitate his partner, and clear the entire terrace before Jason even had time to drop his expensive champagne glass. I pushed the trained violence down deep inside me. Discipline was my greatest weapon, and maintaining my cover was essential. I focused on my breathing. In for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The tactical breathing exercises I had learned in the military kept my heart rate perfectly steady. I was a mother first, and I would not jeopardize my daughter's safety or my custody rights over a bruised ego. "I will call you tomorrow morning, sweetie," I whispered to Lily, kneeling down to her eye level. I completely ignored the wealthy audience watching our private moment. "You have a good weekend, okay?" Lily nodded, her eyes searching mine for reassurance she desperately needed. "I love you, Mom," she said softly, her voice trembling just a bit. "I love you too," I replied, smoothing her hair. I stood up, keeping my posture submissive as I turned back to Jason and Courtney. "Have a nice brunch," I said, my voice soft and deliberately lacking any trace of confidence. I turned around to walk back to my truck, counting the seconds until I could get behind the wheel and drive back to the peaceful sanctuary of my garden center. "Wait a minute, Rebecca," Jason called out sharply. I stopped and turned around. He walked toward me, leaving Courtney with the curious investors. He reached inside his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He shoved it roughly against my chest, forcing me to take it to keep it from falling to the ground. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice small and hesitant. Jason leaned in close, invading my personal space so only I could hear the pure malice dripping from his words. "Those are custody modification papers," he whispered, his breath smelling of expensive alcohol. "I am suing for full physical and legal custody of Lily." I stared at the thick envelope, my heart momentarily freezing in my chest. "You cannot do that," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "We have a shared agreement. The judge signed off on it years ago." Jason let out a dark, triumphant chuckle that made my stomach turn. "Circumstances change, Rebecca. The papers cite your inadequate income, your lack of ambition, and your total inability to provide a standard of living suitable for my daughter. I am going to prove to the court that you are an unfit mother who cannot even provide a basic future. By the time my high-priced lawyers are done dragging you through the mud, you will be lucky to see her every other holiday." He took a step back, surveying me with absolute disgust. "You do not have the money to fight me, and you definitely do not have the spine. Have a safe drive back to your little dirt patch." He turned his back on me and walked back to his lavish party, greeted immediately by the laughter and applause of his wealthy friends. I stood there alone on the driveway, clutching the papers that threatened to take away the only thing in the world that mattered to me. I walked slowly back to my truck, climbed inside, and locked the doors. I tossed the legal envelope onto the passenger seat. I did not cry. I did not panic. I stared out the windshield at the imposing gates of his estate and allowed the timid civilian facade to completely melt away. Jason thought he had backed a mouse into a corner, but he had absolutely no idea that he had just declared war on a predator. The cramped, poorly lit office of David Miller felt like a physical manifestation of my current legal standing. Stacks of yellowing case files teetered on the edge of a cheap particle board desk. The fluorescent light overhead flickered with a persistent hum, casting harsh shadows across David's tired face. He was a good man, a family lawyer who genuinely cared about his clients. But looking at the thick stack of premium embossed paper Jason's legal team had delivered, I knew David was hopelessly outgunned. I sat perfectly still in the uncomfortable plastic guest chair, keeping my breathing even, as David read through the custody modification petition. He wiped a hand across his receding hairline, letting out a heavy sigh that filled the small room. "Rebecca, this is aggressive," he said, sliding the heavy document across the desk toward me. "They are not just asking for a simple modification of the custody schedule. Jason has hired one of the most ruthless corporate litigation firms in the state. They do not usually handle family law unless someone is paying them an exorbitant amount of money to completely destroy the opposing party." I picked up the document, scanning the crisp pages with the same rapid analytical focus I used to review mission briefings. "What is his primary angle of attack?" I asked, my voice remaining entirely neutral. David looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional concern. "He is painting a picture of severe emotional instability. They have taken your quiet lifestyle, your lack of social media presence, and the fact that you run a small gardening business, and twisted it into a narrative of deep clinical depression." I turned the page, reading the fabricated claims Jason had meticulously constructed. The petition stated that my preference for solitude was actually severe social anxiety that negatively impacted Lily. It claimed my modest two-bedroom apartment was an unsuitable environment for a growing child, and painted my gardening work as a sign of a complete lack of ambition that would ultimately stunt Lily's development. He even included affidavits from his wealthy friends, the same people who watched Courtney humiliate me at brunch, swearing they had witnessed me acting withdrawn and lethargic. "He is using my discipline against me," I noted calmly, recognizing the psychological warfare tactic. "Because I do not react to his provocations, because I do not engage in screaming matches or public drama, he is labeling me as emotionally vacant and depressed." David nodded, looking increasingly stressed. "Exactly. And in family court, perception is a massive hurdle. He has the money to drag this out for years. He will request endless psychological evaluations, home inspections, and character witnesses. He is trying to drain your resources until you are forced to capitulate." "Rebecca, I have to be honest with you. To fight a firm like that, we are going to need a retainer that far exceeds anything a small garden center can provide." I closed the document, aligning its edges perfectly with the corner of the desk. Jason was executing a classic siege strategy: cut off the enemy's resources, isolate them, and wait for them to starve or surrender. It was a solid plan against a civilian. But he was not dealing with a civilian. "Do not worry about the retainer, David," I said, standing up and smoothing the front of my jacket. "Just file the standard responses for now to buy me some time. Do not let them know we are intimidated. Maintain a holding pattern." I walked out of the dim office and stepped into the bright California afternoon air. The heat felt good against my skin. I climbed into my pickup truck, the worn leather seat offering a familiar comfort. I started the engine, the old motor rumbling to life, and pulled out onto the main road, heading back toward the garden center. My mind was already compartmentalizing the legal threats, separating the emotion from the tactical reality of the situation. 10 minutes into the drive, my cell phone vibrated in the cup holder. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID displayed Jason's name. I let it ring 3 times, regulating my heart rate before pressing the answer button and putting it on speakerphone. "Hello, Jason," I answered, keeping my tone flat and submissive, exactly as he expected. "Well, if it isn't Mother of the Year." His voice filled the truck cabin, dripping with arrogant satisfaction. "I see you received my little gift on Friday. Have you cried to your bargain bin lawyer yet?" I kept my eyes on the road, maintaining a steady speed. "I read the petition, Jason. It is filled with lies. You know I am not depressed. You know Lily is perfectly happy and well cared for." He let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "What I know does not matter, Rebecca. What matters is what I can prove in court. And with the team I just hired, I can prove that the sky is green if I want to. You are weak. You have always been weak. You hide in your little plants because you cannot handle the real world." I gripped the steering wheel, letting him monologue. In my former career, gathering intelligence on an adversary meant letting them talk, letting their ego reveal their strategy. "You should just sign the papers and save yourself the embarrassment." Jason continued, his tone shifting from mocking to a cold, calculated threat. If you try to fight me, I will bury you. I will drag you through depositions until you are completely bankrupt. I will make sure the court orders psychological evaluations that will dig into every quiet, weird little habit you have. I will bury you in legal fees until you lose that pathetic garden center and end up homeless on the street. Why are you doing this? I asked, injecting just enough false tremor into my voice to feed his narcissism. We had a good arrangement. Lily needs both of us. Lily belongs in a winner's environment. He snapped, the veneer of civility entirely gone. Look at my house, Rebecca. Look at my connections, my wealth, my lifestyle. Courtney and I can give her the world. We can give her private schools, trips to Europe, a network of powerful people. What can you give her? A cramped two-bedroom apartment smelling of fertilizer. You are holding her back. You are a loser, Rebecca. You always were. You are just a quiet, boring loser, and I am tired of pretending you deserve equal time with my daughter. He paused, waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to break down and beg. When I remained silent, he chuckled darkly. You have until Monday to sign the surrender papers. If you do not, I am going to make your life a living hell. Enjoy your empty apartment this weekend, Rebecca. The line went dead. I drove in silence for another 5 miles. The mechanical hum of the truck tires on the asphalt was the only sound in the cabin. I looked at my hands gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white, my grip so tight the worn material of the wheel was groaning under the pressure. I was not shaking from fear or from sadness. I was shaking from a silent, localized fury that burned hotter than a flare. Jason had spent years tearing down my civilian persona, mistaking my enforced restraint for weakness. He thought my silence was the absence of a spine. He thought because I did not raise my voice, I had no power. He fundamentally misunderstood the nature of discipline. The military had spent millions of dollars training me to endure psychological torture, to operate under extreme duress, and to dismantle hostile threats with cold, calculated precision. I had spent over a decade surviving black operations in hostile territories, relying on my ability to blend in, be ignored, and strike only when the target was completely unaware. He wanted to play a game of attrition. He wanted to use his money and his lawyers as weapons to take my child away from me. He thought he was the apex predator in this scenario because he wore an expensive suit and threw lavish brunches. I took a deep breath, releasing the steering wheel slightly to restore circulation to my hands. The anger morphed into sharp, crystal-clear focus. I pulled the truck into the gravel parking lot of my garden center, parking behind the greenhouses where no one could see me. I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet cab. The legal battle was a distraction. It was a loud, flashy maneuver designed to keep me occupied while he secured his real objective. I needed to shift my perspective from defense to offense. If Jason wanted a war, I would not fight it in a courtroom where he held all the advantages. I would fight it on a battlefield of my choosing. I reached into the center console and pulled out my primary phone. I did not need to cry. I did not need to panic. I needed to wait for the signal. The secret protocol I had established with Lily was the only thing that mattered now. I closed my eyes, visualizing the hidden marker in Lily's backpack, the burner phone tucked safely inside it. Jason thought he had all the power because he controlled the narrative. He was about to learn that the most dangerous person in the room is always the one nobody notices until it is entirely too late. I opened my eyes, my vision locked on the horizon, completely ready for the dominoes to start falling. The memory of the previous night played vividly in my mind, anchoring me to my purpose. It had been a quiet Thursday evening in our small apartment. The air smelled of baked chicken and the lavender soap Lily used for her evening baths. We were sitting cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by her scattered sketchbooks and colored pencils. It was a cozy, safe space, entirely different from the sterile museum-like quality of Jason's sprawling estate. I had watched my 10-year-old daughter carefully sorting her art supplies, preparing her backpack for the mandatory weekend with her father. I knew how Jason operated. The moment Lily stepped through his front doors, he would confiscate her regular cell phone, claiming he wanted her completely present for quality family time. In reality, it was an isolation tactic. He hated the idea of Lily texting me while she was under his roof. He monitored her iPad usage, tracked her location through her smartwatch, and ensured every digital communication passed through his highly restricted network. He controlled the environment with absolute authority. I needed a way to bypass his surveillance without raising suspicion. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick, heavy-duty drawing marker. It looked exactly like the expensive artist-grade markers Lily used for her sketches. A thick black barrel with a secure cap. I held it out to her, resting it flat on my palm. "I have a special mission for you, sweetie," I said, keeping my voice light and conspiratorial. "A secret spy game just between you and me." Lily stopped sorting her colored pencils and looked up, her dark eyes widening with immediate curiosity. "A spy game?" she asked, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper matching my tone, "like the ones in the movies?" "Exactly like the movies," I replied, smiling warmly at her. I twisted the cap off the marker to reveal what looked like a standard felt tip. But then I gripped the bottom base of the marker and gave it a sharp counterclockwise twist, followed by a firm pull. The outer casing slid away smoothly, revealing the hollowed-out interior. Tucked perfectly inside the plastic cylinder was a tiny black device no larger than a standard thumb drive. Lily gasped, leaning in closer to inspect it. "What is that?" "It is a micro-communication device," I explained, pulling the tiny burner phone out of the casing. "It is completely untraceable. It does not use standard cellular networks that your dad's security system can monitor. It operates on an encrypted frequency that connects directly and only to my personal secure line. No one can track it, no one can block it, and no one knows it exists except for the two of us." I handed the tiny device to her. It was lightweight, practically invisible if dropped into a pocket. Lily turned it over in her small hands, marveling at the hidden technology. "Why do I need a secret phone, Mom?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. "Dad usually just takes my regular phone and puts it in his office drawer until Sunday." I kept my expression relaxed, hiding the deep protective anxiety churning in my chest. I knew Jason was escalating his behavior. I could see the signs of his narcissism becoming more rigid, more demanding. I refused to leave my daughter in a hostile environment without a lifeline. "Because even the best spies need a backup plan," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sometimes when you are at your dad's house, I know you feel overwhelmed. Courtney can be a lot to handle, and your dad gets very focused on his parties and his investor meetings. I want you to have a way to reach me no matter what. Even if your dad takes your regular phone, even if the house Wi-Fi goes down, you will always have this." I showed her how to operate the device. There was no screen to emit light in a dark room, just 3 small tactile buttons that could be operated blindly inside a pocket. "If you hold down the top button for 3 seconds, it turns on," I instructed, guiding her small thumb over the rubberized controls. "The middle button sends an automated ping to my location, showing me exactly where you are. But the bottom button, Lily, that is the most important one. That is the distress code." Lily looked up at me, the playful spy game atmosphere dimming just a fraction as she sensed the underlying seriousness of my instructions. "What does the distress code do?" "If you press and hold the bottom button for 5 seconds, it sends a pre-programmed text message directly to my secure screen," I explained. "You do not have to type anything. You do not have to look at it. You just hold it down. The message will say, 'The blue butterfly landed.'" I chose the phrase carefully. It was innocent enough that if Jason somehow intercepted it through a fluke of signal interference, he would dismiss it as spam or a child's game. But to me, it meant absolute maximum escalation. "Why a blue butterfly?" Lily asked, running her thumb over the bottom button. "Because blue butterflies are rare and fast and impossible to catch." I smiled, hoping to ease the tension in her small shoulders. "Just like you. Now listen to me very carefully, Lily. This is the most important rule of the game. You only press that bottom button if you feel completely unsafe. Not if you are just bored. Not if Courtney is just being annoying about your clothes. You press it if you feel trapped. You press it if your dad will not let you leave a room, or if you feel a genuine sense of danger that you cannot explain. Do you understand the difference?" Lily nodded slowly. her expression incredibly serious for a 10-year-old. I understand, Mom. If I am in real trouble, I press the bottom button. I took her hands in mine, looking directly into her eyes. My heart ached that I had to burden her with this. No child should have to run covert operations during a weekend visit with their father. But Jason was a master manipulator, and I could not protect her if I was locked outside his wrought iron gates, blind to what was happening inside. If you press that button, I promised, my voice dropping an octave, carrying the full weight of a vow I had forged in combat zones across the globe, I will come for you. I do not care what time it is. I do not care what your dad says. I do not care who is standing in my way or how many locks are on his doors. If you send me that code, I will tear down the walls of that estate to get to you. I will be by your side immediately. Do you believe me? Lily smiled a genuine, relieved smile that illuminated her face. She threw her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder. I believe you, Mom, she whispered against my collarbone. You always protect me. I hugged her back fiercely, resting my cheek against the top of her head. I carefully took the tiny burner phone from her hand, slid it back into the hollowed-out marker, and snapped the cap back into place. I placed the marker in the front pouch of her backpack right next to her standard sketch pad. It blended in perfectly. An ordinary art supply for an ordinary 10-year-old girl. Keep it close, I reminded her, and remember, it is our secret. No matter what your dad promises or what Courtney asks, this is classified information. Only between us. Classified, Lily agreed, executing a perfect salute that made me laugh aloud. The memory faded, replaced by the stark reality of the present moment. I was sitting in the cab of my worn pickup truck parked behind the greenhouses of my garden center. The sun was dipping lower in the California sky, casting long shadows across the rows of potted ferns and ceramic planters. Jason thought he had isolated me. He thought the thick legal envelope sitting on my passenger seat was a decisive victory. He believed he had stripped me of my resources, my confidence, and my ability to fight back. He relied entirely on his wealth and his intimidating security guards to enforce his will. But he had overlooked the single most important variable in the equation. He had mistaken my chosen civilian peace for incapability. I had traded my tactical gear for gardening gloves by choice, not by necessity. I had buried my past because I wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by life and growth, instead of the destruction I had witnessed for 13 years. I reached down into the center console of my truck and pressed a hidden panel near the USB port. The plastic casing popped open, revealing a small biometric safe bolted directly to the chassis of the truck. I pressed my thumb against the scanner. A soft green light illuminated the dark console, and the safe clicked open. Inside rested my secure communication device, a satellite-enabled phone that looked thick and outdated compared to modern smartphones, but carried encryption software the federal government used to protect its most classified assets. I pulled the device from the safe and powered it on. The screen flickered to life, displaying a blank black interface. There were no messages. The screen remained dark and silent. Lily was safe for now. The weekend was proceeding as normally as a weekend in Jason's sterile, controlling environment could. I took a slow, stabilizing breath, allowing the military discipline to wash over the rising maternal panic. I could not act prematurely. Moving against Jason without provocation would only give his high-priced lawyers the ammunition they needed to validate his fabricated claims of emotional instability. I had to remain in a holding pattern. I had to let him feel victorious. I placed the heavy, secure phone carefully into my jacket pocket, feeling its solid weight against my ribs. I picked up the legal envelope from the passenger seat, opening the door of my truck. The warm afternoon air smelled of damp earth and blooming jasmine, a sharp contrast to the cold, tactical reality of the situation I was navigating. I walked toward the back entrance of my shop, my boots crunching rhythmically against the gravel. Let Jason play his legal games. Let him file his injunctions and spread his lies to his wealthy investors. He was playing a game of chess while I was preparing the battlefield. I unlocked the back door of the garden center, stepping into the cool, shaded interior. I would spend the rest of the weekend tending to my plants, projecting the exact image of the helpless, defeated ex-wife he expected. but every muscle in my body was primed. Every instinct honed over a decade of elite warfare was coiled and ready to strike. I checked my pocket one last time, feeling the reassuring shape of the secure phone. The connection to the hollowed-out marker in Lily's backpack was active and fully operational. I was completely ready. If Jason crossed the line, if he pushed Lily into a corner, she could not escape. The distress code would be waiting. And when the blue butterfly finally landed, God help anyone who stood between me and my daughter. Sunday afternoon dragged with an agonizing slowness. I paced the small living room of my apartment, tracking the minutes on the wall clock. The custody agreement was explicit. Jason was required to drop Lily back at my front door no later than 6 in the evening. By 5:45, I was standing by the window watching the street. By 6:15, the street remained completely empty. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang once and went straight to a sterile automated voicemail. I tried again, same result. A cold, familiar knot formed in my stomach. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I drove the familiar route to Palo Alto, keeping my speed precisely at the legal limit. Panic is a luxury I could not afford. The California sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long shadows across the immaculate suburban lawns as I pulled onto Jason's private street. I parked my truck at the end of his sprawling driveway. The massive 12-foot wrought iron gates were pulled shut, the heavy electronic locks engaged. Jason was sending a clear physical message before I even stepped out of my vehicle. I walked up to the towering metal bars, looking through them at the expansive courtyard. I located the brushed steel intercom panel embedded in the stone pillar to the right of the gate. I pressed the call button once. A harsh electronic buzz echoed from the speaker, followed by dead silence. I pressed it again. "Yes, what do you want?" Jason's voice cracked through the speaker, dripping with his signature condescending arrogance. "Jason, it is past 6, I said, injecting the right amount of maternal anxiety into my tone. "You are late for the drop-off. Open the gate so I can get Lily." A low, cruel chuckle resonated through the metal speaker box. "Oh, Rebecca, you always were a bit slow to grasp changing realities. There is no drop-off tonight. There is no drop-off tomorrow either." I placed my hands flat against the cold iron of the gate, gripping the bars tightly to maintain the illusion of a desperate, powerless woman. "What are you talking about, Jason? We have a legal custody agreement. Bring Lily out right now." He let out an exaggerated, theatrical sigh. "You see, Rebecca, Lily and I had a long talk this weekend. She looked around this house and she realized something. She realized that living in a cramped apartment smelling like cheap soil is not what she wants. She decided she wants to live here permanently with Courtney and me." My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind remained ice cold. I knew Lily. I knew the bond we shared. Jason was lying outright. "She is 10 years old, Jason," I responded, my voice shaking slightly in a perfectly calibrated display of distress. "She does not get to make that legal decision, and neither do you. Bring my daughter to the gate immediately, or I will call the police." "You can try to call them, Rebecca," Jason countered, his tone shifting from smug to sharply aggressive. "But you will find they are already very well informed of the situation." My lawyers worked through the weekend. We filed an emergency ex parte injunction early this morning. A judge reviewed the extensive evidence regarding your emotional instability and your incredibly inadequate living conditions. The judge agreed that returning Lily to your custody poses an immediate threat to her psychological well-being. Temporary sole physical custody has been awarded to me, effective immediately. I stood frozen, staring at the metal speaker grill. He had ambushed me, using his immense wealth to fast-track a legal maneuver that would normally take weeks. "I want to speak to her," I demanded, leaning closer to the intercom. "Let me hear her voice, Jason. Let me hear her tell me she wants to stay." "Absolutely not," Jason replied smoothly. "She is currently resting in her suite after a highly emotional weekend. I will not let you manipulate her or guilt-trip her with your pathetic crying. You are completely cut off, Rebecca. Do you understand me? My lawyers will serve you with the official paperwork by tomorrow morning. Until then, you are trespassing on private property. If I leave without my daughter, I am driving straight to the police station I threatened. I will tell them you kidnapped her." The speaker crackled with his laughter again. "Go ahead, Rebecca. Please call the police. Do you know what happens when a poor, emotionally unstable woman calls the cops on a highly respected, wealthy venture capitalist who holds a valid emergency custody order signed by a judge? I will tell you exactly what happens. My legal team will meet the officers at my door. We will show them the court order. Then we will point to the security camera footage of you banging on my gates, harassing my family, and refusing to leave. We will frame you as a hysterical, unhinged stalker who poses a physical threat to my household. The police will not arrest me, Rebecca. They will arrest you." I stood in silence, letting the heavy reality of his threat settle over me. If I fought back loudly, I proved his fabricated narrative of my emotional instability. If I called the authorities, I risked being detained and separated from Lily even further. He had leveraged his power perfectly, assuming I had no countermaneuvers available. "Do you finally understand your position?" he asked, the silence stretching out between us. "You have lost, Rebecca. Go back to your sad little garden center. Accept that you are a failure as a mother, and let Lily have the life she actually deserves. If you cause a scene, I will have you locked in a psychiatric hold by midnight. Do not test me." The intercom clicked off. I stood at the gates for a full minute, projecting total defeat. I let my shoulders slump forward. I pressed my forehead against the cold iron bars, allowing the external security cameras to capture the perfect image of a broken, shattered woman. I played the part flawlessly, giving Jason exactly the visual confirmation he needed to feel utterly victorious and incredibly secure in his position. Then I turned around and walked slowly back to my truck. I climbed into the cab, pulled the door shut, and locked it. I inserted the key into the ignition and started the engine. I put the truck in reverse and backed out of the private street, executing a slow, careful turn. I drove away from the estate, keeping my speed low, making sure anyone watching from the mansion windows would see a completely demoralized ex-wife retreating into the suburban twilight. I drove for exactly 3 miles until the sprawling mansions gave way to a dense commercial zoning district. I pulled my truck into the dark, empty parking lot behind a closed strip mall, shutting off the headlights and killing the engine. The moment the truck went dark, the terrified mother persona evaporated completely. The fear, the shaking voice, the slumped shoulders, they dissolved into the ether, replaced by a chilling, absolute calm. My heart rate dropped to a steady resting rhythm. My breathing became slow and measured. Jason had made a catastrophic tactical error. He believed that cornering me legally would paralyze me physically. He assumed that because I could not use the police, I had no other options. He forgot, or rather, he never knew that my primary operating procedure relied on functioning entirely outside the boundaries of conventional law enforcement. The military had not trained me to file paperwork. They had trained me to infiltrate heavily fortified hostile environments, extract high-value targets, and eliminate any threats that compromised the mission objective. Jason was no longer my ex-husband. He was a hostile combatant holding a high-value asset. The Palo Alto estate was no longer a suburban home. It was a fortified target. And the legal injunction was nothing more than a piece of paper that held absolutely zero tactical value in the field. I reached down to my boots, unlacing them quickly and swapping them for the dark, silent tactical footwear I kept hidden behind the passenger seat. I pulled a dark, unbranded jacket from my duffel bag, slipping it on over my clothes. I reached into the hidden safe in my center console and pulled out the secure satellite phone. I did not need a lawyer anymore. I needed intelligence, and I needed it immediately. I powered on the device, watching the encrypted interface boot up in the dark cabin of the truck. The screen glowed faint green, illuminating my face. The blue butterfly had not landed yet, but the airspace was officially hostile. I was no longer a civilian fighting a custody battle. I was a ghost operating in enemy territory, and Jason had absolutely no idea what was coming for him. The faint green glow of the encrypted satellite phone cast sharp angles across the dashboard of my truck. I sat in the desolate parking lot, breathing in the stale air of the abandoned strip mall. The transition was complete. Rebecca, the submissive garden center owner, ceased to exist. I was back in the operational headspace I had occupied for 13 years. My thumb hovered over the heavy tactile keypad of the device. I punched in a sequence of 12 digits, accessing a secure relay node routed through 3 separate offshore servers. The line clicked and hissed, verifying the encryption protocols before establishing the connection. The phone rang only twice before a voice answered. It was a familiar deep baritone laced with the background hum of cooling fans and server racks. "Speak to me," Cole said, his voice perfectly calm. "It is me," I replied, my tone sharp and authoritative, stripped of any maternal warmth or civilian hesitation. "We have a situation." Cole did not miss a beat. He had been my tactical communications specialist for 7 deployments. He was the man who monitored drone feeds, hacked enemy defense grids, and guided my team through heavily fortified compounds in the dead of night. Since leaving the military, he had transitioned into private cybersecurity consulting, but he still kept his specialized equipment running for contingencies exactly like this one. "I hear you loud and clear, Rebecca," he said, the sound of rapid keyboard clicking already echoing through the receiver. "Give me the parameters. What is the target?" "What?" "The target is Jason." I stated, my eyes scanning the dark, empty parking lot to ensure I remained completely unobserved. He initiated a hostile custody takeover 3 hours ago. He locked Lily inside his Palo Alto estate and claimed he obtained an emergency injunction granting him sole physical custody. He threatened to have me arrested if I approached the gates. He is using his wealth and his legal team to corner me. The typing on Cole's end paused for a fraction of a second before resuming with increased intensity. "He is trying to leverage you out legally," Cole noted. "That is a bold move for a venture capitalist with a pristine public image." "It is a siege tactic," I explained, keeping my voice cold. "He wants to drain my resources and force a surrender. I need you to break into his financial infrastructure. I need leverage. I need you to find me the dirt he is hiding behind those pristine corporate filings. Tax evasion, offshore accounts, shadow companies, or improper use of investor capital. Dig into his venture capital firm and find the financial vulnerability I can use to shatter his pristine reputation and invalidate his custody claim. If I can threaten his public image, I can force him to drop the injunction immediately." "Copy that," Cole replied. "I am initiating a deep dive into his primary corporate holdings. Give me a minute to bypass the standard public relations filters." I sat in the dark truck, listening to the steady, rhythmic clacking of Cole's mechanical keyboard. The sound was incredibly grounding. It transported me back to cramped command tents and armored transport vehicles. I mentally reviewed the layout of Jason Estate, visualizing the perimeter walls, the security camera placements, and the heavy iron gates I had just left behind. "Something is wrong," Cole said, his voice suddenly tight. "Define wrong," I demanded. "I am trying to access his primary holding company servers," Cole explained, the typing growing louder and faster. "I bypassed the standard commercial firewalls, but I just hit a secondary security layer. It is massive, Rebecca. This is not standard corporate security. Are you telling me a civilian venture capitalist has military-grade encryption?" I asked, my analytical mind immediately registering the tactical discrepancy. "It is not military," Cole said. "It is federal. I just tripped a passive monitoring tripwire, the kind used by federal agencies to monitor compromised digital infrastructure. Jason's entire financial network is wrapped in a digital quarantine." A cold knot formed in my stomach. A federal quarantine meant Jason was not just hiding standard corporate malfeasance. It meant he had attracted the attention of entities with limitless resources and severe legal authority. "Can you break through it?" I asked. "It is me." Cole scoffed slightly, the professional pride bleeding through the tension. "Of course I can break through it, but I have to route through a proxy chain to avoid triggering an active trace back to my current location. I am going dark on the main line. Hold your position." The line clicked over to a secure hold sequence, playing a low, continuous tone to verify the connection remained active. I stared out the windshield of the truck. The shadows of the abandoned parking lot seemed to stretch and deepen. The tactical landscape was shifting rapidly. Jason was an arrogant man, but he was not stupid. He would not initiate a highly visible, aggressive legal maneuver against me if he knew federal agencies were actively monitoring his digital footprint. Unnecessary attention was the enemy of any illicit operation. Unless the aggressive custody move was not the primary objective at all. Unless it was a distraction. The hold tone stopped abruptly. Cole's voice returned to the line, stripped of its usual calm confidence. "Rebecca, we have a massive escalation." Cole said, his breathing shallow and rapid. "You need to hear this right now. Give me the intelligence I commanded." I bypassed the federal monitor and got inside the core server of his venture capital firm, Cole reported. Jason is not a successful venture capitalist. The entire firm is a ghost ship. He has no legitimate revenue streams. It is a massive, highly sophisticated cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme. I absorbed the information, instantly processing the tactical implications. "Quantify massive," I instructed. $400 million. Cole stated the sheer magnitude of the number hanging heavily in the quiet air of my truck cabin. He has been defrauding offshore investors, tech billionaires, and institutional funds for the last 4 years. He has been using new investor capital to pay fake returns to the early investors while funneling the principal into untraceable crypto wallets. But the crypto market crashed last month. His liquidity dried up. The entire structure is completely insolvent. And the federal firewall, I asked, piecing the puzzle together. It is the Federal Bureau of Investigation working jointly with the Securities and Exchange Commission, Cole confirmed. They have been quietly building a wire fraud case against him for 6 months. They sealed the indictments 48 hours ago. They froze his legitimate domestic bank accounts this morning. Jason's entire financial empire is dead. The federal agents are literally hours away from kicking his front doors down and arresting him. I sat perfectly still, my mind racing through the variables. Jason was completely bankrupt. He was facing federal prison time for a $400 million fraud. His assets were frozen. His reputation was hours away from absolute global ruin. Yet despite all of this, he had spent his morning filing an emergency custody injunction to trap our daughter inside his heavily fortified estate. It made absolutely zero tactical sense. A man facing imminent federal arrest does not care about winning a domestic custody dispute. A man facing decades in a federal penitentiary does not steal his daughter just to prove a point to his ex-wife. "He is not fighting for custody, Cole," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The injunction was a smokescreen. He needed a legal excuse to keep Lily inside the house and to keep me off the property. He knew I would follow the rules and back down if he threatened me with police action. "Why would he need a smokescreen?" Cole asked, the keyboard clicking, slowing down as he processed my tactical assessment. "Because he is not planning to be there when the federal agents arrive," I stated, the terrifying reality coming into sharp, agonizing focus. "He is running." I gripped the steering wheel, the leather groaning under my hands. Jason was a cornered animal. He had stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from very powerful, very dangerous people. He knew the federal government was closing in. He knew his domestic accounts were frozen. He was executing an emergency exfiltration plan, and he was using my daughter as leverage. He would use her as a shield to maintain his image as a devoted family man, while he secured his escape route. He would drag her into hiding, exposing her to international fugitives and federal manhunts. "Cole, I need you to find his exit strategy," I ordered, my voice slicing through the digital connection with absolute command. "He cannot fly commercial with frozen accounts and sealed indictments. He has to have a private route. Check the local private airstrips. Check his encrypted emails for charter bookings or offshore flight plans. Find out exactly how and when he plans to leave the country." "I am already running the search algorithms," Cole replied, the frantic typing resuming with renewed urgency. "Give me a minute to scrape the deep web flight registries." I stared at the dashboard of my truck, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Jason had crossed the ultimate line. He had dragged my innocent 10-year-old daughter into a high-stakes federal crime. He was treating her like a prop, a piece of luggage to be used in his desperate attempt to escape justice. He had severely underestimated the woman he married. He had severely underestimated the mother he was dealing with. The tactical situation had evolved from a domestic dispute to a high-threat hostage rescue scenario. I was no longer preparing to negotiate. I was preparing to breach the perimeter, eliminate the hostile threat, and extract my daughter by any means necessary. I reached into my jacket, feeling the cold, hard surface of the secondary burner phone I carried. The blue butterfly had not landed yet, but the storm was already here, and I was ready to tear down his entire world. Cole's voice crackled back through the encrypted channel, cutting through the heavy silence of the truck cabin. "I have the exit vector, Rebecca." He bypassed his standard corporate travel agency and used a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands to charter a long-range Gulfstream. The flight plan was filed 30 minutes ago under a pseudonym, but the passenger manifest matches his specific security detail parameters. "Where is he going?" I asked, my eyes scanning the dark perimeter of the parking lot out of sheer habit. "Dubai," Cole answered. "The departure is scheduled for midnight out of a private airfield in San Jose. There is zero commercial oversight and minimal customs friction for a charter like that. Dubai has no extradition treaty with the United States for financial crimes. If that plane leaves American airspace, he is untouchable, and he will take your daughter with him." I processed the geographic reality. Dubai was a fortress for white-collar criminals with enough capital to buy their residency, but taking Lily made it a logistical nightmare for a man on the run. Jason hated inconveniences. He viewed children as accessories to be displayed at brunches, and then handed off to nannies. Stealing her across international borders required effort that contradicted his entire psychological profile. "Why take Lily?" I asked, pressing Cole for the deeper intelligence. "He does not want to be a full-time father. He is running from the federal government. A child slows him down. It brings Amber Alerts and international kidnapping charges. Look at his communications with his primary investors. Find the leverage." "I hear you," Cole said, his keyboard clacking at a furious pace. "I am pulling the decrypted email spools from his hidden offshore servers now. Give me a second to parse the keyword density." The line went quiet except for the digital hum of the connection. I checked the digital clock on my dashboard. It was nearing 7 in the evening. I had exactly 5 hours before his scheduled midnight departure. 5 hours to breach a fortified estate, neutralize a private security detail, and extract my daughter. "Got it," Cole said, his voice dropping an octave thick with disgust. "You were right. It is not about custody. It is about optics. I am reading a highly sensitive thread between Jason and a syndicate of Russian investors who pumped $50 million into his fraudulent crypto scheme. They are threatening him, Rebecca. They are not waiting for the FBI. They are threatening his life. Read the exact text I commanded, needing to understand the precise threat level facing my child. Jason sent them a message 2 hours ago." Cole read, his tone clinical but tight. He told them the frozen accounts are just a temporary regulatory hold. He is promising to meet them in Dubai next week to restructure the funds. To prove he is not a flight risk, he sent them a photograph. It is a picture of him, Courtney, and Lily sitting at the dining room table eating dinner. He told the investors he is just a dedicated family man navigating a bureaucratic misunderstanding. He told them a man planning to steal their money would not fight for full custody of his daughter and take his family on a restructuring trip. The sheer sociopathic brilliance of the maneuver sent a wave of cold fury rushing through my veins. Jason was using my 10-year-old daughter as a human shield. He needed Lily to maintain the illusion of stability. To the violent offshore investors, a man traveling alone in the dead of night was a thief abandoning his post. A man traveling with his new wife and his young daughter was a confident businessman relocating his family. Lily was nothing but a prop to buy him enough time to cross international borders before the Russian syndicate sent assassins to collect their debt. "I need to call the federal authorities," Cole suggested, the sound of his chair squeaking as he shifted his weight. "I can route an anonymous tip to the FBI field office in San Francisco. If I drop this flight manifest and the offshore routing data on their desks, they will raid the Palo Alto estate immediately. They can secure Lily before he ever makes it to the airstrip." "Negative." I snapped my voice cutting through the speaker with absolute finality. Do not contact the authorities, Cole. Stand down on all federal communication. Rebecca. He is fleeing the country with your daughter. Cole argued, his protective instincts flaring. The FBI has tactical teams ready for this exact scenario. I closed my eyes, mapping out the tactical flow of a federal raid. I know exactly how the FBI operates, Cole. If you tip them off, they will not just knock on the front door. They will roll up with armored vehicles and a tactical breach team. They will surround the perimeter and demand his surrender over a loudspeaker. That is what we want, Cole pressed. That is a hostage situation. I corrected my mind, evaluating the horrific variables. Jason is cornered. He knows he is facing decades in federal prison, and he knows international assassins are hunting him. He has 2 armed private security contractors inside that house, whose loyalty is tied to his paycheck. If the FBI surrounds that estate, Jason will panic. He will barricade himself inside. He will use Courtney and Lily as bargaining chips. A standoff could last for days, and it only takes one nervous private security guard with an itchy trigger finger to turn a raid into a bloodbath. I will not put my daughter in the crossfire of a federal siege. The silence on the line indicated Cole understood the grim, tactical reality. You are right. He conceded, his voice heavy. A cornered narcissist with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous target on the board. He will burn the house down with everyone inside if he thinks it will make him look like a martyr. What is the alternative protocol? We handle this off the books. I stated, opening the center console to retrieve a spare encrypted battery pack. The FBI sealed indictments 48 hours ago. They are likely planning to arrest him tomorrow morning when the banks open and the paper trail is fully solidified. They do not know about the private jet yet. We have a narrow window of operational superiority. I am going to breach the estate, extract Lily, and vanish before the federal agents ever arrive. Once my daughter is secure, you can send the flight manifest to the FBI, and they can arrest Jason on the tarmac. You are talking about a solo infiltration against a fortified position with an active security detail. Cole warned, his tone shifting into his designated role as my tactical advisor. I pulled the blueprints of the property from the county server. He has 12-foot perimeter walls, motion sensors on the lawn, and biometric locks on the exterior doors. You are walking into a kill zone, Rebecca. I survived 13 years of kill zones, Cole. I replied, my voice devoid of any emotion. Jason is relying on commercial security systems and rent-a-cops who are used to chasing away paparazzi and angry investors. They have never faced a Tier 1 operator, and they have absolutely no idea I am coming. Before Cole could respond, a sharp vibration against my ribcage shattered the quiet rhythm of the conversation. I froze. The sensation came from the inner pocket of my jacket. The secondary burner phone. The device linked exclusively to the hollowed-out marker currently sitting inside Lily's backpack. Hold the line, Cole, I commanded, pulling the small black device from my pocket. The screen was glowing with a harsh white light cutting through the darkness of my truck cab. There was no caller ID. There was no phone number. There was only a single text message displayed in plain block letters. The blue butterfly landed. My heart stopped beating for a fraction of a second. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The distress code. Lily had pressed the button. My 10-year-old daughter was trapped inside a hostile environment, and she had just initiated the most severe escalation protocol we had. She was terrified. She was cornered. And she was calling for the only person in the world who could save her. I stared at the screen, my military conditioning instantly suppressing the rising tide of maternal terror. Fear was a distraction. Anger was a liability. I needed absolute violent clarity. Before I could relay the status to Cole, the screen of the burner phone lit up a second time. Another message materialized beneath the first one. He locked the doors. We are leaving in an hour. Help. The timeline had just violently collapsed. Jason was not waiting for his scheduled midnight departure. The pressure from the federal freeze or the offshore syndicate had spooked him. He was accelerating the exfiltration. He was moving the package now. Cole. I barked into the satellite phone, my voice cracking like a whip. The timeline is compromised. Jason is accelerating the flight schedule. He locked the doors and he is forcing the departure in 60 minutes. Copy that. Cole responded, his fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed ferocity. He must have gotten a tip about the federal indictments. He is burning his own flight plan. If he leaves the house early, he will bypass the airstrip protocols and head straight for the tarmac. I am tracking his private security communications now. They are calling for the armored transport vehicles to be brought to the front door. I reached down into the passenger footwell and grabbed my heavy canvas duffel bag. I pulled the zipper open, revealing the matte black tactical gear neatly folded inside. There was no time for hesitation. There was no time to wait for favorable conditions. The operation was a go. I am moving to the target location, I told Cole, pulling off my civilian jacket and tossing it onto the passenger seat. I will need you in my ear the entire time. I need you to blind his exterior cameras and loop the footage. I need you to jam any outgoing cellular signals from the property the moment I breach the wall. Jason does not get to make any phone calls. He does not get to call for backup. I am blacking out his digital perimeter now. Cole confirmed, his voice steady and resolute. The local police dispatch is quiet. The FBI channels are quiet. You have a clear window, Rebecca, but it is closing fast. I pulled on my dark tactical shirt, securing the Velcro cuffs. I strapped the lightweight harness across my chest, feeling the familiar weight of the tactical restraints and communication gear settle against my body. The suburban mother who grew orchids and smiled timidly at rude investors was officially dead. Keep the comms open, Cole, I said, pulling the dark tactical beanie over my head to secure my hair. I am going in. I reached down beneath the rubber floor mat of the passenger side, triggering a concealed latch. A small reinforced lockbox slid out from the modified floorboards. I flipped the mechanical latches and opened it, revealing dense foam cutouts housing the tools of my former trade. I did not carry firearms. A gunshot would trigger local law enforcement sensors and instantly escalate the situation from a silent extraction to a hostage barricade. My weapons were stealth speed and superior technology. I pulled out a pair of specialized tactical gloves, securing the Velcro straps tightly around my wrists. Next, I retrieved a compact, localized signal jammer, snapping it onto my tactical belt. Finally, I lifted a small, sterile vial containing 2 thermal imaging contact lenses. These were military prototype lenses capable of registering heat signatures. I carefully applied them to my eyes, blinking rapidly as the chemical solution adjusted to my corneas. The world shifted instantly. The dark interior of the truck cab washed into a spectrum of cool blues, while my own hands glowed a vibrant, aggressive orange. I am fully kitted, I stated, my voice a low murmur registering perfectly in the throat microphone strapped to my neck. Initiating approach to the primary target zone. I hear you. Cole responded, his voice crisp and isolated in my earpiece. I am syncing with your thermal optics now. The feed is stable. I have your visual. I smoothly drove the heavy truck deep into a wooded residential subdivision located 3 blocks from Jason's estate. I parked the vehicle beneath the heavy canopy of an old weeping willow tree. I killed the engine and stepped out into the cool California night, closing the door silently. I moved with absolute precision, my dark tactical footwear making 0 sound against the asphalt. I was no longer restricted by the speed limits or the paved roads of suburban life. I cut straight through manicured backyards and vaulted low decorative fences, closing the distance to the 10-acre compound in under 4 minutes. The perimeter of Jason's estate loomed ahead, rising like a fortress from the surrounding landscape. The barrier was a massive 12-foot wall constructed of solid stone blocks and topped with decorative but lethal iron spikes. To a civilian, it was an impenetrable defense. To an operator, it was simply a vertical surface offering excellent handholds. I crouched in the thick brush across the street, analyzing the visual data streaming through my thermal contacts. Cole, I need a status on the optical sensors, I whispered, my eyes scanning the top of the stone wall. I see 4 actively rotating camera mounts on the southern perimeter. They are overlapping. There are no blind spots in their current configuration. I am already inside their local network, Cole replied, the rapid clacking of his keyboard echoing softly in my ear. I am overriding the southern sector feeds now. I will not freeze the images because a static screen will trigger an alert at the security desk. I am looping the last 5 minutes of empty street footage. You have a 4-minute window before the loop recycles, and the system flags a visual discrepancy. The cameras are effectively blind. Go. I surged forward, leaving the cover of the brush. I crossed the 2-lane street in a dead sprint, hitting the base of the stone wall with maximum momentum. I planted my left boot squarely against a protruding stone, driving my body upward. My tactical gloves gripped the rough surface, finding immediate purchase. I hauled my weight up the vertical plane, ignoring the burn in my shoulders. I reached the top of the wall in 3 seconds, sliding my body horizontally between 2 of the sharp iron spikes to maintain a low profile. I flattened myself against the cold stone, looking down into the expansive grounds of the estate. The courtyard was an immaculate expanse of geometric hedges, crushed gravel pathways, and large decorative marble fountains. The house itself stood 50 yards away, a sprawling modern mansion illuminated by subtle architectural lighting. Through the thermal lenses, the warm stone retained the heat of the day, glowing a soft purple, while the cold water of the fountains registered as deep black. I am on the wall, I reported, keeping my body perfectly flush against the stone. Give me a thermal sweep of the courtyard. I need to know the patrol routes before I drop into the kill zone. Scanning the courtyard now, Cole confirmed. According to the security schedule I pulled from their internal servers, there should be 2 guards walking a figure-8 perimeter check. They are supposed to be on the northern lawn right now, completing a visual inspection of the garage bays. The southern courtyard should be completely clear for the next 90 seconds. You have a clean drop zone. I shifted my weight, preparing to dismount. The drop was 12 feet onto crushed gravel, a surface specifically designed to crunch loudly under human footsteps and alert nearby security. I isolated my core muscles, preparing to absorb the kinetic energy of the impact through my knees and ankles to mute the sound. I slid my legs over the edge, gripping the stone, coping with my fingertips. I exhaled slowly, pushing the air from my lungs to relax my skeletal structure. I released my grip, dropping straight down into the shadows. I hit the ground, executing a perfect tactical landing. My knees bent deeply, my hands grazing the gravel to distribute the shock of the fall. The impact produced nothing more than a faint whisper of shifting stones, completely swallowed by the ambient sound of the distant marble fountains. I rolled instantly into the dense cover of a manicured boxwood hedge, becoming entirely invisible in the darkness. I am in, I whispered, adjusting my position within the thick foliage. The physical infiltration was successful, but the tactical environment was highly volatile. The air tasted metallic, a physical manifestation of the adrenaline coursing through my system. Wait, Cole said, his voice suddenly sharp, slicing through the calm focus of my earpiece. Hold your position, Rebecca. Do not move a single muscle. The thermal signatures on the secondary grid just jumped. I froze, pressing my chest into the damp soil beneath the hedge. What is happening? I demanded, my eyes scanning the dark courtyard through the thermal lenses. The patrol routes just shifted. Cole warned, the urgency in his voice spiking. Jason must be accelerating the exfiltration timeline even faster than we anticipated. He just broadcast a radio command to the entire security detail. He ordered a full perimeter lockdown and a secondary sweep of the courtyard. The guards on the northern lawn are not completing their circuit. They are cutting straight through the center of the property. They are heading directly toward your sector. I slowed my heart rate, forcing my body into absolute stillness. The gravel pathway stretching between my position and the mansion suddenly felt like a massive exposed canyon. I tracked the thermal signatures rapidly approaching from the left side of the estate. 2 distinct human forms glowing a vibrant orange and red against the cool blue background of the manicured lawn. They were moving quickly, their strides long and purposeful. They are closing in on the southern courtyard. Cole reported, his breath catching slightly. You cannot cross the open ground. They will intercept you before you reach the terrace steps. I analyzed the tactical geometry of the space. Retreat was not an option. Waiting in the bushes would only result in discovery once they initiated their sweep. I had to advance, but the path was completely blocked. The two security contractors rounded the corner of the large central fountain, stepping out of the shadows and directly into my line of sight. Through the thermal lenses, I could see the distinct heat signatures of the heavy sidearms holstered on their right hips. They were large men, ex-military or private military contractors, moving with the rigid discipline of trained enforcers. They halted directly in the center of the gravel pathway, positioning themselves exactly between my concealed location in the hedges and the back entrance of the mansion. "Check the southern perimeter!" The taller guard commanded, his voice low and gruff, carrying clearly across the quiet courtyard. The boss wants the entire property sealed tight before the armored transport vehicles pull up to the front doors. Keep your eyes open. The second guard unclipped a heavy tactical flashlight from his belt, sweeping the brilliant white beam across the lawn. The harsh light sliced through the darkness, illuminating the crushed gravel and the edges of the boxwood hedge where I lay concealed. They were standing 10 feet away, forming a literal human wall between me and my daughter. I reached down to my belt, gripping the heavy plastic zip ties and the localized signal jammer. The quiet infiltration phase was officially over. The beam of the tactical flashlight swept inches above my head, illuminating the dark, waxy leaves of the boxwood hedge. I controlled my breathing, slowing my heart rate to a steady, rhythmic crawl. The taller guard turned his head to the left, communicating something over his shoulder radio. That momentary distraction was the only opening I needed. I erupted from the dense foliage with explosive kinetic energy, completely silent and lethal. I targeted the taller guard first, knowing his superior size made him the primary threat. Before he could even register the movement in his peripheral vision, I closed the 10-foot gap. I drove the hardened heel of my tactical glove directly into the brachial plexus on the side of his neck. The strike was calculated to shock the nervous system and disrupt blood flow to the brain. His eyes rolled back instantly. As his knees buckled, I grabbed the front of his tactical vest, guiding his massive frame down to the crushed gravel to prevent the heavy thud of a falling body. The second guard reacted with impressive speed given the suddenness of the ambush. He recognized the threat and dropped his hand to his right hip, his fingers locking around the grip of his holstered sidearm. He drew a breath to shout a warning to the rest of the security detail. He was fast, but he was operating on instinct, while I was operating on over a decade of muscle memory. I abandoned the unconscious first guard, stepping inside the second guard's defensive perimeter. My left hand clamped over his mouth, sealing his shout behind my leather glove. Simultaneously, my right hand trapped his wrist, pinning the partially drawn weapon against his own hip. I pivoted sharply, driving my hips into his center of gravity, and executed a flawless judo throw. The momentum lifted him off his feet, and we went down together. I maintained absolute control of his weapon hand as we hit the ground, securing my body weight across his chest. I wrapped my legs around his torso, applying a triangle chokehold while maintaining the vice grip on his mouth. He struggled violently, thrashing his legs against the gravel, but the choke restricted the blood flow to his brain. Within 10 seconds, his frantic movements slowed. Within 15, his body went completely limp. The entire physical engagement had taken exactly 28 seconds. There were no shouts, no gunshots, and no alarms triggered. I rolled off the unconscious guard, breathing evenly. I immediately activated the localized signal jammer on my belt. The small device emitted a concentrated electromagnetic field, blanketing a 10-foot radius. Any radio transmissions from their earpieces or automated biometric alerts from their smartwatches would be completely suppressed. The main security desk would simply register a temporary loss of signal, a common occurrence on large estates with thick stone walls. I grabbed the heavy tactical collars of their vests and dragged both men deep into the center of the boxwood hedge. I pulled the heavy plastic zip ties from my belt, securing their wrists tightly behind their backs and binding their ankles. I used their own uniform scarves to fashion secure gags, ensuring they would remain completely silent when they eventually regained consciousness. The path to the mansion was clear. I left the cover of the hedges and sprinted across the remaining expanse of the courtyard. My dark clothing blended perfectly with the night shadows. I reached the base of the massive stone structure, pressing my back flat against the cool marble facade. The ground floor doors were heavily fortified with reinforced glass and biometric scanners, but the architectural design of the house offered a glaring tactical vulnerability. A series of thick decorative stone columns framed the back terrace, leading directly up to a sprawling second-story balcony. I holstered the jammer and gripped the edges of the nearest stone column. I scaled the vertical surface rapidly, pulling my body weight upward with fluid, efficient movements. I reached the ornate iron railing of the balcony and vaulted over it, landing silently on the smooth terracotta tiles. Through my thermal lenses, I scanned the heavy glass French doors leading into the master suite. The heat signature radiating from the electronic locking mechanism indicated a standard magnetic latch. I pulled a thin titanium bypass tool from my pocket, sliding it skillfully into the gap between the doors. I manipulated the magnetic catch, applying precise pressure until I heard a soft, satisfying click. I pushed the heavy glass doors open, slipping into the dark interior of the mansion. The transition from the cool night air to the heavily climate-controlled environment was jarring. The air inside smelled of expensive citrus room spray and the sharp metallic tang of pure panic. I moved like a ghost across the plush imported carpets of the master bedroom. I kept my footfalls light, rolling from heel to toe to distribute my weight, completely avoiding the creaking floorboards I mapped out in my mind. I stepped out of the bedroom and into the vast open corridor of the second floor. A sweeping grand staircase constructed of polished white marble curled down toward the main foyer. From my elevated vantage point, hidden in the deep shadows of the second-floor landing, I had a clear line of sight into the massive formal living room below. The space was an ostentatious display of wealth, filled with modern art, pristine white furniture, and a massive crystal chandelier. But the pristine image of the room was completely shattered by the explosive human drama unfolding within it. Jason stood by a large marble fireplace, his expensive tailored suit jacket discarded on a chair, his tie ripped completely open. His face was flushed crimson with rage. Across from him stood Courtney, his 29-year-old wife. She was clutching a designer leather handbag to her chest like a physical shield. Her flawless makeup was ruined by streaks of heavy black mascara running down her cheeks. She was trembling violently, her chest heaving with deep, erratic sobs. The tension radiating from the room was thick enough to choke on. "I told you to pack the bags!" Jason roared, his voice echoing harshly against the high ceilings. "We leave for the airstrip in exactly 45 minutes. Do not stand there crying like an idiot. Get your passports and get in the car." Courtney shook her head, taking a desperate step backward. "I am not going anywhere with you," she screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "I just got off the phone with my brother. He works for Chase Bank. Jason. He told me everything. He tried to wire the funds for the private jet catering, and the account was blocked. He checked the status and told me the federal government has frozen every single account tied to your name. Every single one. You told me we were going on a spontaneous luxury vacation to Dubai. You lied to me." I watched Jason take a menacing step toward her, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. The charismatic venture capitalist persona had completely evaporated, exposing the cornered, desperate narcissist beneath. "I did not lie," he hissed menacingly. "We are taking a vacation. We are taking a long, permanent vacation. The federal regulators are just throwing a tantrum over a minor clerical error in the offshore portfolios. It is a temporary freeze, but we have to leave the country tonight before they make a public spectacle out of it." "It is not a clerical error," Courtney sobbed hysterically, dropping her designer bag onto the floor. "You stole $400 million. My brother said the FBI sealed the indictments 2 days ago. They are coming to arrest you. If I get on that plane tonight, I am aiding and abetting a federal fugitive. I will go to federal prison. I am not going to jail for you, Jason. I am staying right here, and I am telling the authorities that I had absolutely no idea what you were doing." Jason moved with a sudden explosive violence that made my muscles coil instantly. He grabbed Courtney by the upper arms, shaking her violently. "You are getting on that plane," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "If you stay here, they will interrogate you. They will freeze your personal accounts. They will take the cars, the jewelry, the clothes, everything I bought for you. You are my wife. In the eyes of the federal government, you are completely complicit. Your only chance of maintaining any semblance of a decent lifestyle is to get on that jet with me tonight. I have physical cash and untraceable offshore crypto wallets waiting for us in Dubai. We can live like kings. But if you betray me, I will make sure my legal team drags you down into the dirt with me. Courtney wept openly, the terrifying reality of her situation crushing her completely. She was trapped. She realized she had married a monster and her luxurious lifestyle had just transformed into a horrific federal nightmare. But what about Lily? She cried, pushing weakly against his chest. Why did you force Rebecca to give us full custody today? Why are we kidnapping your daughter? She slows us down. She makes us a target. Jason released her, shoving her roughly backwards so she stumbled against a white leather sofa. Because I am not a complete idiot, he spat, adjusting his rumpled collar. The Russian investors, the men who funded the seed capital for the latest fund, they know about the frozen accounts. They think I am cutting and running with their money. If I show up at the private airstrip alone, they will have their local associates execute me on the tarmac. But if I arrive with my beautiful new wife and my sweet, innocent 10-year-old daughter, they will see a devoted family man simply relocating his household. Lily is our insurance policy, Courtney. She is the human shield that gets us onto that plane alive. Now stop asking stupid questions, dry your face, and go upstairs to get her. I stood frozen in the shadows of the landing, my blood running absolutely cold. The tactical intelligence Cole had provided was completely accurate, but hearing Jason explicitly outline his plan to use my daughter as a human shield against international assassins ignited a level of maternal rage I had never experienced. This was no longer a rescue mission. It was a targeted elimination of a hostile threat. I watched Courtney slowly nod, her spirit completely broken. She wiped her ruined makeup with the back of her trembling hand and turned toward the grand staircase. She was coming up to the second floor. She was heading directly toward Lily's room. I needed to move immediately. The countdown had accelerated exponentially. I stepped back silently, blending deeper into the heavy shadows of the corridor, ready to secure the most important asset of my entire life. I melted deeper into the shadows of the second-floor corridor. The heavy velvet drapes masking the tall windows blocked out the moonlight, creating a tunnel of darkness. I could hear the slow, defeated rhythm of Courtney ascending the grand staircase. Her heels clicked against the marble steps, dragging with the weight of a woman who realized she married her own doom. I did not wait for her to reach the landing. I moved with fluid, silent urgency, bypassing the main gallery and gliding down the eastern wing of the mansion where Jason kept the family quarters. At the very end of the long hallway stood a heavy oak door. I recognized the layout from the architectural blueprints Cole had transmitted to my device earlier. This was Lily designated suite. I reached for the handle, but my thermal lenses picked up the faint heat signature of an active electronic current running through the door frame. I crouched low, examining the locking mechanism. Instead of a standard deadbolt, Jason had installed a commercial-grade biometric scanner right into the wall paneling. It required a registered thumbprint to grant access. He had literally imprisoned our daughter inside her own bedroom, locking her in a gilded cage to ensure she could not disrupt his frantic escape plan. "Cole," I whispered into my throat microphone, keeping my voice barely above a breath. "The target room is secured from the outside with a high-end biometric keypad. It looks like a military-grade capacitive scanner meant to keep out serious intruders, not 10-year-old children. Courtney is halfway up the main staircase. I have less than 90 seconds before she rounds the corner and spots me in the hallway. I need a bypass solution immediately because brute force will alert the entire house." "I hear you," Cole responded, his voice crackling with sharp focus. "I cannot hack a capacitive scanner remotely without a direct physical bridge to the internal network. The system is hardwired to prevent digital intrusion. You are going to have to fry the local circuitry. Access the secondary interface on your tactical watch. I designed the casing with a micro-electromagnetic pulse emitter specifically for localized hardware disruption." I lifted my left wrist, tapping the bezel of my matte black watch. The digital face shifted from the standard chronological display to a raw command terminal glowing faintly in the dark. The footsteps on the staircase grew louder. Courtney was nearing the landing. Her ragged sniffling echoed through the cavernous space, adding a chaotic element to an already rapidly deteriorating timeline. Press the crown twice and hold it for exactly 3 seconds, Cole instructed, his typing frantic in the background. It will generate a highly concentrated EMP burst with a radius of approximately 4 inches. It will not trip the main breaker, but it will completely overload the delicate microprocessors inside that biometric scanner. Place the face of the watch directly against the scanning glass. I pressed the cold metal of the watch flush against the glowing glass panel of the biometric lock. I tapped the crown twice and held it down. The digital countdown initiated on my wrist. 3, 2, 1. A sharp, almost imperceptible popping sound emanated from the locking mechanism, followed immediately by the acrid smell of burnt ozone and melting plastic. The green indicator light on the keypad flickered wildly before dying completely. The heavy internal deadbolt disengaged with a dull metallic thud, dropping heavily into the unlock position. I pushed the heavy oak door open, slipping inside the dark bedroom and pulling it shut behind me with absolute silence. I engaged the manual interior lock, securing the space just as the distinct sound of Courtney heels echoed from the hallway outside. The bedroom was massive, decorated in sterile shades of gray and white that completely lacked the warmth of a child's sanctuary. In the far corner, huddled tightly beneath a thick duvet, was a small, trembling shape. The ambient light from the street lamps outside cast long shadows across the floor, but my thermal optics clearly highlighted the bright, terrified heat signature of my daughter. "Lily," I whispered, removing the thermal contacts and letting my natural vision adjust to the darkness. "It is me." The duvet was thrown aside instantly. Lily scrambled across the massive bed, her bare feet hitting the hardwood floor. She did not scream. She did not cry out. She remembered the rules of the game. She sprinted across the room and launched herself into my arms. I dropped to my knees, catching her and pulling her tightly against my chest. We shared a profound, silent, tactical embrace. I buried my face in her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo. My heart, which had been beating with cold mechanical precision for the last hour, finally thudded with fierce maternal relief. She was unharmed. She was safe. "You came!" Lily whispered directly into my ear, her small arms wrapped around my neck in a vice grip. I pressed the button on the secret marker, just like you told me. I sent the blue butterfly. He locked the door from the outside, Mom. He told me to pack my bags and said we were going away for a very long time to Dubai. He said you did not want to see me. I knew he was lying. I pulled back slightly, keeping my hands firmly on her shoulders to ground her. I looked directly into her dark eyes, assessing her physical and emotional state. "You did perfectly, Lily. You followed your training. You accurately assessed a hostile environment, and you executed the distress protocol flawlessly. I am incredibly proud of you. You are a brave, brilliant girl. But the mission is not over yet. We are in a highly volatile situation, and I need you to be my partner right now. Can you do that for me?" She wiped a single tear from her cheek and nodded, her posture straightening. Her resilience astounded me. She was her mother-daughter, shedding the panic of a frightened child and adopting the focused discipline of a survivor. She reached down and pulled on her dark sneakers, securing the Velcro straps tightly across her instep. "What are my orders?" she asked, her voice steadying remarkably well. I quickly briefed her on the exfiltration path, maintaining the calm, authoritative tone I used with my squad operators during high-stress extractions. I needed her focused entirely on the logistics of our escape. "Your father has initiated a flight risk protocol," I explained. "He intends to forcefully relocate you to a foreign country to avoid severe legal consequences for a massive financial crime. He has armed security contractors on the perimeter, and his new wife is currently approaching this door." We cannot exit through the windows because the exterior courtyard is heavily monitored and actively patrolled by men with weapons. We must move through the interior of the house, navigating the blind spots Cole has mapped out for us. We will use the secondary servant stairs at the end of the east wing to completely bypass the main foyer and the primary security hub. From there, we will access the subterranean garage, utilizing the shadows between his luxury vehicles, and exit through the service doors into the wooded ravine behind the property limit. I reached into my tactical rig and pulled out a small pair of noise-canceling communication earpieces. I slid one into her left ear, adjusting the soft silicone tip for a secure fit. I tapped the small microphone clipped to my collar to demonstrate the audio link establishing our closed communication loop. I have an Overwatch operator named Cole monitoring our blind spots. I told her, keeping my instructions sharp and absolute. He is a very good friend, and he is watching us through the cameras right now. If we get separated, which we absolutely will not, you listen to his voice. He will guide you to safety, using the thermal cameras he hacked on the perimeter. You will stay exactly one pace behind me at all times. You will step exactly where I step, utilizing my physical shadow to completely mask your movement from any intersecting sight lines. You will not speak unless I ask you a direct question demanding a verbal response. If I tell you to hide, you melt into the shadows, making yourself as small as possible, and you do not make a single sound until I give you the all clear. You breathe slowly through your nose to minimize noise. Do you understand the exact parameters of the exfiltration and the rules of engagement? I understand, Lily confirmed, touching the small earpiece. Stay behind you. Step where you step. Stay quiet and listen to Cole. I stood up, drawing my daughter close. The heavy oak door rattled violently against its frame. The metallic handle jiggled aggressively from the outside as someone attempted to force the damaged mechanism to yield. Courtney had arrived at the threshold, demanding entry. Inside the darkened bedroom, Lily pressed her back against my legs, completely silent, relying entirely on the tactical instructions I had just delivered. I held my breath, tracking the thermal signature of Courtney's hand against the exterior panel. Through the thick wood, I could hear her ragged breathing. Inside the darkened bedroom, Lily pressed her back against my legs, completely silent, relying entirely on the tactical instructions I had just delivered. I held my breath, tracking the thermal signature of Courtney's hand against the exterior panel. Through the thick wood, I could hear her ragged breathing and the frantic tapping of her designer fingernails against the melted plastic casing of the keypad. She let out a sharp, frustrated curse, muttering venomous words about Jason and his ridiculous security system. Her heat signature lingered for another agonizing 5 seconds before she finally spun around on her heels. The heavy clicking of her stilettos echoed down the corridor, moving away from Lily's suite and heading back toward the sprawling master bedroom at the center of the east wing. "Cole," I whispered into my throat microphone, keeping my voice at an absolute minimum. "Target is moving away from the door. Confirm her position." "She is heading back to the master's suite," Cole reported, his voice crisp and focused in my earpiece. "She is moving erratically. I am tracking her thermal bloom crossing the main landing. She is inside the master bedroom now. You have a clear corridor for exactly 40 seconds before the secondary patrol rotates back to the front courtyard. Take the back stairwell immediately." I placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder, giving her a firm double tap. That was our physical signal to move. I disengaged the manual interior lock with a slow, deliberate turn, preventing the heavy metal tumblers from making a sound. I pulled the heavy oak door open just enough to allow our bodies to slip through the gap. We stepped out of the bedroom and into the cavernous darkness of the second-floor hallway. The air in the corridor felt heavy, thick with the lingering scent of Courtney's expensive floral perfume and the undeniable static of impending violence. Lily followed her training flawlessly. She stayed exactly one pace behind me, her small, dark sneakers stepping precisely where my tactical boots had just lifted from the plush carpet. I utilized the deep shadows cast by the towering marble columns, moving with fluid, practiced efficiency. We bypassed the grand sweeping staircase, avoiding the open sightlines of the main foyer, where Jason was currently pacing and screaming at his security contractors over the radio. We needed to reach the narrow servant stairwell, tucked discreetly behind the East Wing gallery. That path would drop us directly into the blind spot Cole had mapped near the subterranean garage. We closed the distance, rapidly moving as a single synchronized shadow. We were less than 20 feet from the concealed doorway of the back stairwell. The extraction was proceeding with absolute tactical perfection. But no operational plan survives first contact with the enemy. Without a single warning sound, the towering double doors of the master bedroom violently swung open, throwing a wide, aggressive shaft of bright yellow light across the dark corridor. The sudden illumination sliced directly across our extraction path. I halted instantly, dropping my center of gravity and freezing my momentum. Lily bumped softly into my lower back, recovering her balance with remarkable silence and pressing herself flat against the decorative wall paneling exactly as she had been instructed. Courtney stepped out into the hallway, directly intercepting our route. She was dragging a massive, heavy designer suitcase behind her. The expensive leather luggage thumped loudly against the doorframe, catching on the thick carpet. She yanked it forward with a desperate, frantic burst of energy, cursing under her breath. Her face was a portrait of absolute terror and ruined vanity. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks in jagged, dark streaks, and her hands were trembling so violently she could barely maintain her grip on the luggage handle. She was abandoning Jason, and she was running for her life. She turned her head to navigate the suitcase around the corner, and her eyes locked directly onto my position. The physical shock of seeing a woman dressed in black tactical gear standing silently in the private hallway of her heavily fortified mansion hit Courtney like a physical blow. Her eyes widened in absolute horror, taking in the dark combat clothing, the tactical harness, and the cold, unblinking stare I leveled at her. For a split second, she did not even recognize me as the timid ex-wife she had viciously mocked just hours earlier at her lavish brunch. She only saw an intruder, a phantom, a lethal threat standing between her and her desperate escape. Courtney drew a sharp, ragged breath. Her chest expanded rapidly, her mouth opening wide to unleash a piercing, terrified scream that would instantly summon the armed private security contractors patrolling the grounds below. A single sound from her would compromise the entire extraction protocol and plunge Lily into the center of a chaotic, violent firefight. I closed the 10-foot gap between us in a fraction of a second. I moved with blinding, explosive speed, abandoning stealth for absolute, overwhelming physical control. Before the air could even leave Courtney's lungs to form a sound, I was completely inside her personal space. I clamped my left gloved hand firmly over her mouth and the lower half of her face, cutting off her oxygen intake and sealing her scream behind thick tactical leather. Simultaneously, my right hand shot forward, gripping her right shoulder, driving her backward with unstoppable momentum. I pinned her body flat against the rigid silk wallpaper of the corridor, ensuring the impact was entirely controlled and non-violent, but absolutely unyielding. I used my body weight to lock her into place, trapping her arms against her sides so she could not flail or strike the walls. Courtney's eyes bulged with pure, unadulterated terror. Her pupils dilated wildly, staring into my face as the realization of my identity finally broke through her panic. She recognized the eyes of the mousy suburban florist she had relentlessly degraded. But the woman holding her pinned to the wall with the effortless, terrifying strength of a seasoned combat veteran bore absolutely no resemblance to the victim she thought she knew. Courtney began to thrash her body, jerking aggressively against my hold. She let out muffled, frantic whimpers against my leather glove, kicking her designer heels uselessly against the plush carpet. Her survival instincts were flaring, urging her to fight a battle she had already completely lost. "Stop moving!" I commanded, my voice dropping to a harsh, icy whisper directly into her left ear. My tone carried the absolute lethal authority of a commanding officer in a hostile war zone. "If you make a single sound, those armed men downstairs will come running up here with drawn weapons. My daughter is standing right behind me. If you bring a firefight into this hallway and put my child in danger, I will not hesitate to eliminate you. Do you understand me?" Courtney froze, her frantic struggling halting instantly. The raw, unfiltered promise of violence in my voice penetrated her panic. She blinked rapidly, tears spilling hot and fast over my gloved hand. She gave a tiny, jerky nod of her head, signaling her compliance. I maintained the firm pressure over her mouth, leaning in closer, so my lips were mere inches from her ear. I needed to shatter the remaining illusions she harbored about her current situation. I needed to dismantle her reality completely so she would not interfere with my extraction. Listen to me very carefully, Courtney. I whispered, my words cold and precise, cutting through her hysteria. You are not going on a luxury vacation tonight. You are not escaping to Dubai with a wealthy venture capitalist. Jason is completely bankrupt. He has orchestrated a $400 million financial fraud, and his entire empire is a ghost ship. The federal government has officially frozen every single bank account tied to his name and to yours. I felt Courtney's entire body stiffen against the wall, the terrifying truth slamming into her. She let out a muffled sob, her eyes searching mine for any sign of deception. I offered her nothing but cold, hard facts. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is en route to this estate right now. I continued, my voice steady and relentless, detailing the absolute destruction of her life. They sealed the indictments 2 days ago. They know about the stolen offshore funds. They know about the private jet waiting at the San Jose airstrip. If you walk down those stairs and get into that car with Jason, you are no longer a frightened wife running away from a bad marriage. The moment you step onto the tarmac with a man fleeing federal prosecution, you become an active accomplice to a massive international financial crime. Courtney squeezed her eyes shut, her chest heaving with silent, ragged breaths. The designer suitcase she had dragged out of the bedroom slipped from her trembling fingers, hitting the carpeted floor with a soft, heavy thud. The reality of her situation was absolute. She was trapped in a nightmare with no money, no power, and no escape route. Jason is planning to use you and Lily as human shields, I whispered, delivering the final devastating blow to her psyche. He told his violent offshore investors that he is simply relocating his devoted family. He needs you to look like a loving wife so the Russian syndicate assassins do not execute him before he boards that plane. He does not care about you, Courtney. He is using you as a prop to save his own life, and he is perfectly willing to let you take the fall and go to federal prison when the authorities eventually catch him. I slowly loosened my grip on her shoulder, allowing her a fraction of space to breathe. Courtney remained completely paralyzed, pinned to the wall by the sheer crushing weight of the truth. Her eyes were wide, blank, and staring into the dark corridor. The condescending, status-obsessed woman who had mocked my faded jeans was entirely gone, replaced by a broken, terrified shell, realizing her entire life was a catastrophic lie. I am going to remove my hand from your mouth now. I stated, my tone shifting from threatening to absolute command. You are going to stand perfectly still. You are not going to scream. You are going to stay in this hallway, and you are going to let me walk away with my daughter. When the federal agents kick those front doors down in 15 minutes, you are going to surrender your phone, and you are going to cooperate completely. That is your only chance of avoiding a federal prison cell. Do we have an agreement? Courtney gave another tiny, jerky nod, her tear-streaked face pale and hollow. I slowly, carefully peeled my gloved hand away from her mouth. She did not scream. She did not breathe heavily. She simply slumped back against the silk wallpaper, sliding slowly down until she was sitting on the floor beside her abandoned designer suitcase. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around her legs, shivering violently in the climate-controlled hallway. I turned away from the broken woman, dismissing her completely from my tactical assessment. She was no longer a threat. She was a casualty of Jason's destructive narcissism. I looked back into the shadows where Lily stood perfectly still, her dark eyes wide, but incredibly brave. I gave her a firm, reassuring nod, signaling that the path was finally clear. I turned away from the broken woman, dismissing her completely from my tactical assessment. She was no longer a threat. She was a casualty of Jason's destructive narcissism. I looked back into the shadows where Lily stood perfectly still, her dark eyes wide, but incredibly brave. I gave her a firm, reassuring nod. The stealth extraction plan was officially over. It was time to finish this at the source. I knelt in the dim corridor, bringing myself eye level with my daughter. I placed my hands on her shoulders, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. "You stay right here, Lily," I whispered, my voice carrying the calm, absolute certainty of a commanding officer. "You stay in the shadows with Courtney, and you do not make a sound until I call for you. Cole is still watching the thermal feeds. You are perfectly safe." Lily gave a firm nod. Her dark eyes locked onto mine. She did not cling or cry. She simply backed into the deepest recess of the hallway, pulling her knees to her chest, right beside the paralyzed, trembling form of her stepmother. Courtney remained exactly where I had pinned her, staring blankly at the wall, completely broken by the reality of her impending federal nightmare. I stood up, rolling my shoulders backward to release the residual tension from the physical breach. The extraction phase was complete. The asset was secured. Now I had to clear the exfiltration route and neutralize the primary hostile threat. I turned my back to the shadows and walked toward the sweeping grand staircase that descended into the main foyer of the mansion. I did not attempt to muffle my footsteps anymore. Stealth was no longer required. I wanted him to hear me coming. My dark tactical boots struck the polished white marble steps with a heavy, deliberate rhythm. Each footfall echoed through the cavernous, high-ceilinged space, ringing out like a slow, steady drumbeat. The air in the mansion felt thick and overly conditioned, smelling faintly of expensive leather and nervous sweat. I descended the curved staircase with perfect posture, my spine straight, my hands resting loosely at my sides near the heavy utility belt securing my tactical gear. The transition was absolute. The quiet suburban mother who tended orchids and apologized for breathing too loudly was dead. The woman walking down those stairs was a highly trained apex predator stepping into the light. Down in the massive, opulent foyer, the scene was a portrait of frantic, arrogant chaos. 3 large leather suitcases sat near the heavy mahogany front doors. Jason was pacing furiously across the intricate tile mosaic spanning the center of the room. He had a sleek smartphone pressed tightly to his ear, muttering angry rapid-fire instructions to someone on the other end of the line. Flanking the front doors stood 2 massive men, clad in tailored dark suits. These were not the standard perimeter guards I had neutralized in the courtyard. These men carried themselves with a rigid, dangerous discipline that immediately flagged them as elite former military contractors. Their eyes tracked the room with cold efficiency, their hands resting casually near the concealed weapons holstered beneath their jackets. The sound of my heavy boots striking the marble stairs sliced through the tension in the room. Jason snapped his head upward, his face twisting in sudden annoyance, expecting to see Courtney finally bringing Lily down for the extraction. Instead, his eyes landed on me. He froze perfectly still, holding the phone to his ear. For a fraction of a second, sheer, unadulterated confusion washed over his features. He blinked rapidly, trying to reconcile the image of the woman descending his staircase with the mental profile he held of his ex-wife. I was dressed entirely in black tactical gear, my face devoid of makeup, my hair pulled back tightly under a dark beanie. But the confusion evaporated almost instantly, replaced by a massive sweeping wave of arrogant amusement. Jason slowly lowered the phone from his ear, pressing a button to end the call. He let out a loud, booming laugh that bounced off the vaulted ceiling. The sound was sharp and cruel, completely devoid of genuine humor. "I do not believe it," he announced, his voice dripping with venomous condescension. "I really do not believe it. I told my lawyers you were emotionally unstable, Rebecca, but I did not think you would actually snap and break into my house." He took a few steps toward the base of the staircase, shaking his head in mock pity. "How did you even get in here? Did you climb over the service gate? Did you sweet-talk one of the caterers into leaving a side door open? It does not matter. The fact that you are standing in my foyer dressed like some pathetic extra from a cheap action movie is the greatest gift you could have possibly given me." I continued my descent, maintaining a steady, measured pace. I did not speak. I did not react. I simply watched his pupils dilate with narcissistic glee. "You just could not accept defeat, could you?" Jason mocked, spreading his arms wide to showcase the grandeur of his estate. I told you I had the emergency injunction. I told you I had sole custody. And instead of going back to your sad little apartment to cry, you decided to trespass on my property. Do you have any idea what this means for you? This is breaking and entering. This is criminal trespass. My lawyers are going to have an absolute field day with this. I am going to make sure the judge sees the security footage of you sneaking around my house looking like a deranged stalker. You are never going to see Lily again, Rebecca. You will be lucky if they allow you supervised visitation through a glass window. He stopped pacing, planting his feet firmly on the marble floor. He crossed his arms over his chest, puffing out his chest to project dominance. I stood exactly 3 steps above him, looking down into his smug, triumphant face. I remained completely silent. My face was a mask of cold stone. I was observing his breathing patterns, noting the slight tremor in his hands, betraying the underlying panic of his collapsing financial empire. He was trying to assert dominance over me to compensate for the absolute loss of control he was experiencing in the rest of his life. "Are you mute now?" Jason sneered, his smile faltering slightly as my silence stretched on. "Did your brain finally short-circuit? I expected you to be on your knees begging me to let you see her. I expected you to be sobbing, making a pathetic scene. But standing there saying nothing just makes you look even more insane. You drove all the way over here, broke into my heavily fortified home, and for what? To stand on my stairs and stare at me. You are pathetic, Rebecca. You have always been pathetic." My continued silence began to deeply unsettle him. Narcissists rely on reactions to fuel their power. When denied that fuel, they inevitably escalate their behavior to force a response. Jason's confident smirk twisted into a scowl of genuine irritation. He uncrossed his arms and pointed a highly aggressive finger directly at my chest. "I am completely done playing games with you," he barked, the false civility entirely gone from his voice. "I have an extremely important flight to catch tonight, and you are wasting my very valuable time." He turned his head sharply over his shoulder, looking at the 2 massive former military contractors standing by the front doors. "Gentlemen," he commanded, his voice loud and authoritative. "This woman is an unstable trespasser who has illegally entered my home. She has a history of severe mental illness, and she is currently violating a court-ordered custody injunction. Restrain her immediately and drag her outside to the perimeter gate. Do whatever you have to do to secure her. If she struggles or tries to fight back, you have my full authorization to use maximum physical force. Break her arm if you have to. I do not care. Just get this crazy woman out of my sight right now. I will call the police from the car and have them pick her up from the curb." The 2 elite bodyguards stepped forward in unison, their heavy footfalls echoing in the foyer. They moved with the synchronized precision of men who had cleared hostile buildings in foreign war zones. They unbuttoned their tailored suit jackets simultaneously, freeing their arms for physical combat and exposing the tactical holsters secured to their belts. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They simply locked their eyes onto my center of mass and began to close the distance across the marble floor, preparing to execute their employer violent orders. I took the final 3 steps down the sweeping staircase, stepping fully onto the polished floor of the grand foyer. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stopped exactly 5 feet away from Jason, planting my boots firmly shoulder-width apart. I rolled my neck slightly, feeling the vertebrae pop and settle into perfect alignment. I let my arms hang loose and relaxed, completely free of tension, ready to move with explosive, blinding speed. The mask of the mousy, fearful florist, the woman who lowered her eyes and apologized for her own existence, was entirely permanently gone. The cold, dead stare of a Tier 1 operator locked onto Jason's face. The transition was so absolute, so physically palpable, that the 2 advancing bodyguards subconsciously slowed their pace. Their military instincts caught the subtle shift in my posture, the relaxed readiness of a lethal combatant, and it caused a microscopic hesitation in their advance. Jason, however, lacked the training to recognize the mortal danger standing directly in front of him. He just saw his ex-wife, the woman he thought he had successfully broken, standing in his way. He took a step backward, moving behind the protective wall of his advancing security detail, a cruel, arrogant smile returning to his lips. He was completely ready to watch me get physically destroyed. He had absolutely no idea that he had just trapped himself inside a cage with a monster. The marble floor felt cold beneath my tactical boots, grounding me in the present moment as I prepared to dismantle the last barrier between my daughter and absolute freedom. I did not raise my hands to a fighting stance. I did not shift my weight to prepare for a strike. Instead, I reached slowly and deliberately into the pocket of my dark tactical jacket. The two elite bodyguards tensed their hands, hovering millimeters from their holstered weapons, but they held their positions, waiting to see what I was drawing. I pulled out the heavy encrypted satellite phone. I stepped forward, closing the distance to the ornate marble entryway table, positioned between the base of the staircase and the front doors. I placed the phone flat on the polished stone surface. The heavy thud of the device against the marble echoed sharply across the quiet foyer. You have exactly 15 minutes before the Federal Bureau of Investigation breaches your front gate, Jason, I stated. My voice was no longer the quiet whisper of a subjugated ex-wife. It rang through the cavernous space with absolute military authority, a commanding baritone that demanded instant compliance. The warrants are signed. The tactical teams are currently moving into position at the perimeter of this subdivision. They have completely secured the access roads. Jason peered around the broad shoulder of the lead bodyguard. His face twisted into a sneer, a desperate attempt to maintain his crumbling facade of total control. You are completely delusional, Rebecca. He spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and mounting fear. You think you can walk into my house and bluff me with some ridiculous story about the federal agents? You are pathetic. You are just trying to buy time because you know these men are about to physically destroy you. He gestured aggressively toward the two towering contractors. Do not listen to a single word she says. Grab her right now. Throw her outside on the pavement. The bodyguards shifted their weight, preparing to execute the violent command. Before they could take a single step forward, a sharp electronic crackle erupted from the mansion integrated surround sound system. The expensive flush-mounted speakers embedded in the ceiling and walls suddenly hissed with static, overriding the ambient silence of the foyer. That is a negative on the bluff, Jason. Cole's deep, digitally enhanced voice boomed through the high-fidelity speakers, raining down from every corner of the massive estate. The sudden, disembodied voice caused the two bodyguards to freeze their tactical training, momentarily short-circuiting as they tried to locate the source of the audio intrusion. Jason snapped his head upward, staring at the ceiling in absolute disbelief. "Who is that?" he shouted, panic finally cracking through his arrogant veneer. "Who is in my system?" "My name is not important," Cole replied, his voice echoing with cold technological supremacy. "What is important are the numeric sequences I am currently viewing on my terminal. Let us review them together, shall we?" Cayman Islands offshore routing account, ending in 4729. Primary balance was precisely $112 million. Secondary holding account in the British Virgin Islands, ending in 8814. Balance was $288 million. Jason's face lost all color. The smug billionaire persona completely dissolved, leaving behind a terrified hollow shell. His jaw went slack as he listened to a faceless hacker recite the exact details of his highly classified illegal financial network. "You told your Russian syndicate investors that the federal freeze was a temporary domestic issue." Cole continued, his voice relentless and echoing through the marble halls. "You told them the offshore principal was perfectly safe and ready for extraction in Dubai. But you made a fatal error, Jason. You linked your encrypted offshore wallets to your internal estate server for one last balance check before your flight. I rode that connection straight back through your proxy chain." "No!" Jason gasped, taking a stumbling step backward until his shoulders hit the heavy wooden panels of the front double doors. "Shut it down. Shut the network down right now." "It is entirely too late for that," Cole announced. "I have intercepted the outgoing wire transfers you scheduled for midnight. I rerouted the destination protocols. The entire $400 million portfolio has just been permanently diverted to an encrypted holding account directly controlled by the Securities and Exchange Commission. You are completely broke, Jason. You have zero liquidity. You have no leverage. You are a federal fugitive with no resources and a syndicate of heavily armed offshore investors who are going to be extremely unhappy when they realize their money has vanished. I stood perfectly still, watching the absolute destruction of a monster. Jason's legs visibly shook beneath his tailored trousers. He looked around the grand foyer, his eyes wild and unfocused, seeking an escape route that no longer existed. He looked at the two massive bodyguards, his last remaining line of defense. "Kill her!" Jason screamed, his voice reaching a hysterical, frantic pitch. "The money is gone. Kill her right now and go upstairs to find Lily. We have to take the girl and get to the airstrip immediately. We can still make the flight, break her neck, kill her." The two elite bodyguards were hardened professionals, but they were also mercenaries. They had just heard that their employer was entirely bankrupt and facing imminent federal arrest. A smart contractor would have walked out the front door and vanished into the night. But Jason's frantic screaming triggered their aggressive conditioning. They had been paid a massive upfront retainer to protect this man, and they saw a single unarmed woman standing between them and the completion of their contract. They made the absolute worst tactical calculation of their entire lives. They moved simultaneously, utilizing a classic pincer maneuver designed to overwhelm a target through sheer combined mass. The guard on the left lunged forward, aiming to tackle me around the waist and pin me to the marble floor. The guard on the right stepped wide, throwing a heavy, looping right hook aimed directly at my jaw, intending to knock me unconscious instantly. They weighed 250 pounds each, consisting of solid muscle and intensive combat experience. They expected a struggle. They expected me to back away or raise my arms in a desperate defensive block. I did neither. I stepped directly inside the perimeter of the left guard, utilizing his own forward momentum against him. As he dropped his center of gravity to tackle me, I pivoted sharply on my right heel, twisting my torso completely out of his trajectory. I brought my left forearm up in a rigid, devastating strike, driving the hardened bone directly into his exposed throat. The impact crushed his windpipe instantly. His forward momentum transformed into a chaotic, violent tumble as his body slammed heavily onto the unforgiving marble floor. He gasped desperately for air, his hands flying to his throat, entirely incapacitated. The right guard recognized the sudden shift in the tactical landscape, but his heavy right hook was already in rapid motion. He could not pull the aggressive strike back. I ducked smoothly underneath his sweeping arm, feeling the air rush past my ear. I stepped firmly into his personal space, planting my left boot behind his leading leg to block his retreat. I drove my right palm upward with explosive force, catching the soft underside of his chin. The palm strike snapped his head backward with a sickening crack, violently hyperextending his cervical spine. Before his massive body could even begin to fall, I grabbed the thick lapel of his tailored suit jacket with my left hand, using it as an anchor point. I executed a brutal sweeping kick to his remaining supporting leg, sweeping his feet completely out from under him. The massive 250-pound contractor crashed flat onto his broad back. The back of his skull connected with the polished marble floor, producing a sharp, resonant thud that echoed across the high vaulted ceilings of the foyer. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he went completely limp, sliding into deep unconsciousness before the heavy echo even faded. The entire physical confrontation lasted exactly 4.2 seconds. The silence that descended upon the grand foyer was absolute and terrifying. The only sound was the ragged, desperate wheezing of the first guard struggling to draw oxygen through his bruised windpipe. I stood in the exact center of the room, my breathing perfectly, even my heart rate completely regulated. I smoothed the front of my dark tactical jacket, adjusting the thick Velcro cuffs with slow, deliberate movements. I slowly turned my head, locking my eyes onto Jason. He pressed flat against the heavy mahogany front doors. His arms splayed wide as if trying to merge with the wood and disappear completely. His face was a mask of mind-shattering horror. The arrogant, powerful venture capitalist had completely evaporated into nothingness. He stared at the crumpled, motionless bodies of his elite protection force. His brain failed to comprehend the fluid, devastating violence. I took a single measured step toward him. The sound of my tactical boot striking the polished marble shattered his paralysis. Jason shrank back, pressing his spine so hard against the heavy mahogany front doors that the solid wood groaned under his weight. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, sticking to his forehead in thick, sweaty clumps. His chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths as his gaze darted frantically between the broken, unconscious bodies of his highly trained mercenaries and the steady, unblinking focus burning in my eyes. He held his hands up in front of his face, a pathetic defensive gesture from a man who had never thrown a physical punch in his entire life. "Please," he stammered, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, desperate whine. "Please do not hurt me, Rebecca. I have money. I have offshore accounts the hackers missed. I can get the money back. I can give you whatever you want. I will give you full custody today. I will sign the papers right now. Just let me walk out of here." I ignored his pathetic bargaining. I took another step, closing the distance until I stood less than an arm length away from him. He smelled of pure fear, an acrid, sour scent that cut right through the expensive designer cologne he wore. He sank slowly down the doorframe, his knees buckling completely until he hit the hard floor. He pulled his knees toward his chest, curling into a tight fetal position. "What are you—" He choked out the words, barely audible over the sound of his own ragged sobbing. "What the hell are you, Rebecca? You are just a florist. You plant flowers in the dirt. You are afraid of loud noises and confrontation. You are just a quiet, boring woman." He was completely broken, stripped of the arrogant venture capitalist mask, the gaslighting narcissist, and the controlling abuser. All that remained was a terrified coward realizing the entire foundation of his reality was a fabricated lie. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely no pity. "I am exactly who I have always been, Jason," I stated, my voice cold and absolute. "You just only saw what your massive, fragile ego allowed you to see. I am not a timid florist who shrinks from loud noises. I am a retired Tier 1 operative, formerly attached to Naval Special Warfare. For 13 years before I ever met you, I operated in the darkest, most violent corners of the globe. I survived classified Black Ops war zones. I infiltrated heavily fortified terrorist compounds. I extracted high-value targets from hostile territories where a single tactical mistake meant a brutal, agonizing death. I have faced hardened warlords and international mercenaries who would look at a corporate bully like you and laugh out loud. You think you are powerful because you wear a custom suit and manipulate financial spreadsheets?" I continued, my tone laced with absolute disdain. "You think you are intimidating because you hire private security contractors to stand behind you and enforce your will? You have absolutely no concept of what real power or real violence looks like. Your entire world is a sterile, padded playground designed to protect fragile, weak men like you from the actual harsh realities of human survival. You play petty games with stolen money and expensive lawyers. I played games with human lives on a daily basis." Why, he gasped, his hands trembling uncontrollably against his knees. "Why did you let me treat you like that for all these years? Why did you take the insults and the endless custody threats if you could do this? Why did you hide it from everyone?" I knelt down, bringing my face directly level with his. I locked my eyes onto his, ensuring he felt the full, devastating weight of my words. "Because I wanted to be a mother," I whispered, the fierce maternal truth radiating through my tone. "I wanted my daughter to have a normal, peaceful childhood. I had seen enough blood and destruction to last 50 lifetimes. When I finally left the military, I swore I would leave the violence behind me forever. I carefully cultivated the image of a quiet, timid florist because I wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by life and growth, instead of death and chaos. I took your insults, Jason. I swallowed my pride every single time you mocked my clothes or belittled my business or threatened me with your lawyers. I played the role of the weak, pathetic ex-wife because your fragile ego required it. As long as you felt superior, you remained calm. As long as you thought you were winning, you left Lily alone and allowed her to have a stable environment. Your corporate bullying was nothing but a pathetic minor inconvenience to me. It was a tactical sacrifice I gladly made every single day to ensure my child felt safe and protected from the ugliness of the world. But then you changed the parameters of the engagement, I said, my voice dropping into a lethal, dangerous register. You panicked over your collapsing Ponzi scheme, and you decided to use my innocent daughter as a human shield. You locked her inside this house and planned to drag her across international borders into a haven for federal fugitives. You exposed her to the very real threat of Russian syndicate assassins. You thought you could use her as a convenient prop to save your own miserable life. Jason shook his head rapidly, pressing himself harder against the door. I was going to protect her, he lied, his voice cracking. I would never let them hurt her. You made the ultimate fatal mistake, Jason, I stated, ignoring his pathetic lies. You threatened my child. You forced me to reactivate the very skills I had buried to protect her. You brought the war to my doorstep, and now you get to face the absolute destruction that comes with it. The realization that his manipulation tactics were completely useless finally shattered the last remaining fragments of his rational thought process. The survival instinct of a cornered rat kicked in, overriding his paralyzing fear. He realized I was not going to negotiate. He realized his money meant absolutely nothing to me. He realized he had to escape right now, or spend the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary. Jason let out a guttural, desperate scream. He scrambled to his feet, pushing off the mahogany doors with frantic, chaotic energy. He did not try to attack me. He knew that would be immediate suicide. Instead, he lunged to his right, sprinting wildly toward the long hallway that led directly to the subterranean garage. He thought if he could just reach his armored luxury vehicle, he could smash through the perimeter gates and disappear into the night before the federal authorities arrived. His desperate sprint was clumsy and uncoordinated. He moved like a panicked civilian, throwing his arms wildly and slipping slightly on the polished marble floor. I did not even break a sweat. I turned smoothly, tracking his chaotic trajectory with cold, analytical precision. I let him take exactly 4 hopeful steps toward the hallway, allowing him to believe for a fraction of a second that he might actually escape. Then I closed the distance. I surged forward, covering the space in 2 rapid, fluid strides. I did not strike him. I simply dropped my center of gravity, shifting my weight to my left leg. I swept my right tactical boot in a devastatingly fast horizontal arc, catching Jason precisely behind both of his ankles. The tactical sweep completely eradicated his forward momentum and entirely removed his foundation. His legs flew out from under him. Jason hung suspended in the air for a single terrifying moment before gravity took over. He crashed down onto the hard, polished marble floor with a brutal, bone-jarring impact. The air rushed out of his lungs in a loud, forceful wheeze. Before he could even attempt to draw a breath or roll over, I was on top of him. I dropped my right knee firmly into the center of his spine, pinning his chest flat against the cold stone floor. I grabbed his right wrist, twisting his arm sharply upward and locking it tightly behind his back in a standard military compliance hold. I applied just enough upward pressure to his shoulder joint to ensure that any sudden movement on his part would result in an immediate, agonizing dislocation. Jason let out a sharp cry of pain, his face mashed sideways against the pristine marble tiles. He writhed weakly beneath my knee, but he was completely immobilized, trapped beneath the unyielding weight of my tactical hold. "You are breaking my arm!" He whimpered, fresh tears streaming down his cheeks and pooling on the floor. "I am doing exactly what is required to secure a hostile flight risk." I corrected my voice, devoid of any emotion. "You are not going anywhere, Jason. The exfiltration is officially cancelled." As I held him pinned against the floor, a sudden brilliant flash of light pierced the darkness outside the mansion. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows flanking the front entrance suddenly erupted with intense strobing colors. Brilliant flashes of violent red and blinding blue light washed across the foyer, illuminating the grand staircase, the crystal chandelier, and the unconscious bodies of the elite bodyguards. The colors danced and spun across the polished marble walls, painting the interior of the estate in the undeniable chaotic hues of federal law enforcement. A second later, The heavy soundproof glass of the mansion windows vibrated as the piercing, deafening wail of multiple police sirens surrounded the property. The sound was massive and overwhelming, echoing from the front gates, the side access roads, and the rear perimeter. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, alongside local special weapons and tactics units, had arrived in full force. The synchronized mechanical screech of armored transport vehicles locking their brakes echoed through the night air, followed immediately by the heavy rhythmic thud of heavily armed federal agents deploying rapidly across the manicured courtyard. Through my secure earpiece, Cole's voice crackled with professional satisfaction. "The cavalry has arrived, Rebecca. Perimeter is entirely locked down by federal authorities. No one is getting in or out. Your exit path remains clear." I looked down at Jason, who had stopped struggling completely. He stared blankly at the strobing red and blue lights reflecting off the marble floor, his eyes wide with absolute final despair. The empire he had built on lies, manipulation, and fraud was completely finished. The sirens wailed louder, a triumphant, chaotic symphony, announcing the definitive end of his reign. The reckoning had finally arrived, and there was absolutely nowhere left for him to hide. The red and blue lights continued their violent dance across the marble foyer, casting long, shifting shadows over Jason's defeated form. I maintained my localized pressure on his shoulder joint, keeping him entirely pinned to the floor. From the upper landing, the faint sound of footsteps drew my attention. I did not shift my tactical focus, but I tracked the movement using my peripheral vision. Courtney was descending the grand, sweeping staircase. She moved slowly, her posture rigid with a mixture of residual terror and sudden absolute clarity. Her ruined makeup still stained her cheeks, but the hysterical panic had burned away completely. In her right hand, she gripped a small black burner phone. Her left hand was wrapped tightly around the small fingers of my daughter. Lily walked beside her stepmother, perfectly silent, adhering to the strict operational discipline I had instilled in her. She did not look at the unconscious bodyguards or the strobing lights outside. Her dark eyes were locked entirely on me. Jason twisted his neck, struggling to look up at the staircase. "Courtney," he gasped, his voice a pathetic, raspy plea. "Courtney, help me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You have to tell them I was just trying to protect the family." Courtney reached the bottom of the marble stairs and released Lily's hand. She walked deliberately toward us, the sharp clicking of her designer heels echoing through the foyer like a metronome counting down the final seconds of his empire. She stopped right next to where I had him pinned. She looked down at the man who had promised her the world, and then threatened to drag her into a federal prison cell. She did not scream. She did not cry. The illusion of the wealthy, powerful venture capitalist had shattered, and she was looking at the pathetic wreckage left behind. Courtney raised her right hand and opened her fingers. Jason's untraceable burner phone, the device he had used to coordinate the massive financial fraud and negotiate with Russian assassins, dropped through the air. It landed squarely on the center of his back with a sharp plastic clatter. "I am not going to federal prison for you, Jason," she stated, her voice devoid of any warmth or affection. "I am cooperating fully with the authorities. Have a nice flight." She stepped directly over his prone body, her expensive stiletto heels narrowly missing his outstretched hand. She walked straight toward the heavy mahogany front doors, reaching out to grasp the brass handles. She did not look back. She simply pulled the massive doors open, exposing the grand entryway to the blinding lights of the federal staging area outside, and walked out to surrender herself. The moment the heavy door swung open, the night air rushed into the stagnant foyer, carrying the sharp, amplified commands of federal agents. "Do not move. Keep your hands visible." Armed tactical units from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, alongside local SWAT operators, flooded the entryway. Their boots thundered against the marble as they fanned out, executing a textbook dynamic entry. Laser sights sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the unconscious bodyguards, and settling firmly onto Jason. I released my compliance hold on his shoulder and stood up smoothly, stepping back to grant the assault team a clear perimeter. Two heavily armored agents instantly converged on Jason, driving their knees into his back and wrenching his arms into steel handcuffs. He did not resist. He simply buried his face against the cold floor, sobbing uncontrollably as the Miranda rights were read to him over the deafening noise of the raid. Lily sprinted across the remaining distance of the foyer and launched herself into my arms. I caught her, lifting her off the ground and burying my face in her shoulder. I held her tight, letting the familiar weight of my child ground me back into my primary role as a mother. "We are going home, sweetie," I whispered into her hair. "The mission is over." I turned to navigate our exit route, but a tall man in a dark federal windbreaker stepped directly into my path. He was the lead supervisory agent, his badge gleaming under the strobe lights. His tactical team had secured the perimeter, and he was currently assessing the bizarre scene in the foyer. He looked at the two massive, incapacitated bodyguards, then looked at me. His eyes scanned my dark tactical clothing, the localized jammer on my belt, and the rigid, disciplined posture I maintained even while holding my daughter. He did not demand my identification. He did not order his men to detain me. He recognized the specific tactical signature of a Tier 1 operator. He knew exactly what kind of ghost he was looking at. The federal agent gave me a slow, sharp, respectful nod, acknowledging the unspoken clearance level that separated me from the civilian criminals he was there to arrest. "The area is secure, Mom," the agent stated, his voice calm and deferential. "The perimeter is clear for your departure." I returned the nod, adjusting my grip on Lily. "Thank you, Agent," I replied. I carried my daughter through the massive front doors, walking straight past the chaotic swarm of law enforcement vehicles and flashing lights. I did not look back at the ruined mansion or the sobbing, broken man being dragged out in handcuffs. I walked into the cool California night, completely unhindered, stepping out of the darkness and back into the light. 3 months later, the California sun beat down warmly on the sprawling outdoor displays of my garden center. I stood near the back greenhouses, wearing a faded denim apron and a comfortable pair of worn work boots. The scent of blooming jasmine and damp potting soil filled the air, creating a rich, peaceful atmosphere that was a million miles away from the cold, sterile marble of Jason's former estate. I was carefully pruning a rare orchid, my hands moving with gentle, practiced precision. I was no longer hiding behind these plants. I was nurturing them, building something beautiful and lasting. A sudden burst of laughter echoed from the front counter. I looked up to see Lily running through the aisles of terracotta pots, chasing a small stray butterfly that had wandered into the shop. Her smile was bright and completely unburdened. The dark shadows of fear and anxiety that used to cloud her eyes during the weekends she spent with her father were entirely gone. The legal aftermath of that night had been swift and absolute. The federal government had seized every single asset tied to Jason's name, including the Palo Alto mansion, the luxury vehicles, and the remaining shell companies. He was currently sitting in a maximum security federal penitentiary, awaiting trial for wire fraud, money laundering, and attempting to flee the jurisdiction. The prosecuting attorneys had informed me that, based on the mountain of evidence and the full cooperation of his former wife, Courtney, Jason was facing a minimum of 20 years behind bars. He was permanently stripped of his wealth, his enablers, and the arrogant power he used to terrorize everyone around him. The legal system had completely dismantled his empire. The family court judge who reviewed the emergency custody injunction had been absolutely furious when the federal charges came to light. The fabricated claims of my emotional instability were immediately thrown out. Given Jason's incarceration and the severe criminal charges pending against him, the court awarded me full, uncontested legal and physical custody of Lily. The legal battle that Jason had promised would bankrupt and destroy me ended before it even truly began. He had built a fortress of lies and paper, but it only took one night of concentrated truth to burn it entirely to the ground. I wiped a smudge of dirt from my cheek and smiled as Lily ran over to me, holding up a small painted ceramic pot she had been working on. The stark contrast between my two very different lives had never been clearer to me. I had spent 13 difficult years mastering the dangerous art of war, operating in the cold shadows and executing violent protocols to protect national security. But the greatest victory of my entire life did not happen on a classified battlefield. It happened right here in the quiet, peaceful reality I had fought so hard to reclaim. Jason had mistaken my silence for weakness. He thought my refusal to engage in his petty, dramatic conflicts meant I lacked a spine. He never understood that true strength is not just about being the loudest person in the crowded room. True strength is not about throwing childish tantrums, waving expensive lawyer fees around, or forcing innocent people to fear you. True strength is about knowing exactly what you are capable of, possessing the ultimate power to destroy an adversary and choosing to keep it leashed. It is the absolute discipline of holding your fire and unleashing the hidden monster only when it truly matters most. People often confuse a chosen silence with submission. For years, I allowed my ex-husband to believe his wealth, his expensive lawyers, and his loud arrogance made him the apex predator. I chose faded jeans, quiet days tending to my garden center, and an unassuming life. I let him think I was weak because my ego never required his validation. If there is one thing my journey has taught me, it is this: never mistake a person's peace for a lack of capability. When dealing with narcissists, bullies, or those who use their status to make you feel small, it is easy to feel outgunned. But true strength does not need to announce itself at lavish parties or hide behind armed guards. Real power is defined by absolute discipline. It is knowing exactly what you are capable of, maintaining your composure under fire, and keeping your capabilities completely leashed until the moment they truly matter. When you are pushed into a corner, especially when the people you love are threatened, you do not need to match your adversary's chaotic noise. You only need to trust your inner resilience. Let them underestimate you. Let their arrogance blind them to your actual strength. Their underestimation is your greatest tactical advantage. You can build a sanctuary of peace and still possess a spine made of absolute steel. You do not have to be loud to be lethal. Have you ever had to hide your true strength to protect your peace, only to unleash it when someone crossed the ultimate line? Share your story of quiet resilience in the comments below. If my journey of reclaiming power resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about surviving, adapting, and defending what matters most.